to you I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, GM workers went on strike in Brazil. The Letter Carriers Union has a convention next week, and we have a member on to tell us what to expect. The Painters Union is coming to Huntsville. We have a representative tell us what they're up to. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The line is not open. You're going to have to wait until the second half of the program to call in, but you can leave a voicemail anytime throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next episode. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We will take calls beginning at 11 a.m. Central on the second half of the program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, especially at our website, TVLR.fm. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to make a one-time or monthly recurring contribution, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate. If you would like to buy our logo, cap, or other merch, including this incredibly cool Join a Union t-shirt, you can go to our store, tvlr.fm/store. We also have some new merch up for pre-order. You know, if you know those Supreme tees, the t-shirts that just say Supreme, well, we've got one stylized like that, but it says Unionize instead of Supreme. It's pretty cool. And we also have some matchboxes. I think those are pretty cool. The matchboxes say Fire Your Boss. So, you know, if you ever, you know, you're going to be doing some campfires, if you smoke a pipe, anything like that, it's always cool to have matches instead of a lighter. So you can buy some matchboxes from us with a box that says Fire Your Boss. It's pretty cool. And we are in the middle of a fundraising campaign right now. We just started a fundraising campaign trying to raise $10,000 by September 15th. It costs money to do this program, to be on the radio, to pay people to do the post-production stuff, to rent the studio, all of that kind of stuff. And we've had a couple of sponsors drop and some other sponsors not materialize. So trying to raise some money to fill in those gaps, trying to raise $10,000 by September 15th. So if you go to tvlr.fm/union 2024, tvlr.fm/union 2024, you can donate to our fundraising campaign. You can also, like I said, buy the new merch at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local or international union to sponsor the program. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who believe that the South's labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener joining us this morning. We really appreciate you spending some time with us.
That's right. And with that, we're going to jump into our first segment, Last Week in Southern Labor, where we survey what workers were up to in the U.S. South and the American colonies in the last week. This installment is from July 26th through August the 2nd. In new union campaigns, 854 workers across 9 bargaining units are in new union campaigns. 27 employees in one bargaining unit are in the middle of a raid, and 563 workers in one unit are in a new decertification election. 365 Civil Rights Division lawyers at the Department of Justice are organizing a union with the National Treasury Employees Union, NTEU, motivated by an interest in locking in current working conditions, they say. Over 140 Teamsters across Florida at Breakthrough Beverage Group formally demanded the company recognize their right to collectively bargain. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 10 workers at Environmental Air Systems in High Point, North Carolina, demonstrated support for unionization with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 421. 25 security guards at Secure Remedy in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the National Capital Union for Security Officers, NCUFSO. The Federal Contract Guards of America, FCGOA, are attempting to raid a unit of 27 security guards at KR Contracting in Sterling, Virginia, who are currently represented by Union Rights for Security Officers, URSO. 86 security guards at ASP Security in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with NCUFSO. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the National Nurses United as the union representing 563 workers at SSM Health in St. Louis, Missouri. 27 workers at Hyatt Regency and J&B Cleaning as joint employers filed a petition to hold a union election with Unite Here, Local 25. 60 workers at WEHT WTVW in Henderson, Kentucky filed a petition to hold a union election with the National Association of Broadcast Employees and Technicians, NABET, CWA. 17 workers at Starbucks in Little Rock, Arkansas filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. And the employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 125 workers at Specs Family Partners in Dallas, Texas, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters Local 745. Labor Notes has a new article out surveying the growth of the EV industry in the South, the same EV industry that Donald Trump wants to destroy, and the importance of organizing it in campaign updates. And in election results, we had 216 workers across 5 bargaining units newly unionized. 25 workers in one bargaining unit voted against unionization, and 46 workers in one bargaining unit decertified their union. 13 workers at Starbucks in Sutton, West Virginia voted 10-1 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 178 workers at AGL Services Company in Atlanta, Georgia voted 140-11 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1997. 25 workers at Point Broadband Fiber Holding in Bristol, Virginia voted 5-16 against unionization with IBEW Local 934. 46 workers at Hendrickson Mount Vernon voted 21-25 in favor of decertifying the Teamsters, Local 245. 14 workers at Intralot in Baton Rouge, Louisiana voted 11-1 in favor of unionization with the IBEW, Local 995, and 7 workers at Atomic Transport in Chattanooga, Tennessee voted 5-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 519. 4 workers at John Fabic Tractor Company in Cape Girardeau, Missouri voted 3-1 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 513. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, Bessemer City Schools were found to have underpaid their employees, according to a new audit from the state of Alabama. McKenna Schuler did some sleuthing for the Orlando Weekly and found that the Florida contractor on last week's Boss Watch that received over $160,000 in fines for willful safety violations, that contractor being Carpenter Contractors of America, is a member of the Greater Orlando Builders Association, which led the charge for loosening child labor laws on work sites in Florida. In strikes and bargaining updates, Amazon workers at ATL 6 in Atlanta, Georgia, rallied with members of the Atlanta DSA, the Union of Southern Service Workers, and the Teamsters to raise the workers' demands for a safe workplace. The SPLC union has a thread on Twitter detailing some of the two-faced actions from the SPLC in the wake of the firing of dozens of their colleagues. Bargaining begins for the Teamsters National Costco contract on August 21st, with the expiration date set on January 31st. Newly organized Costco workers in Norfolk, Virginia, just voted to authorize a strike. UE Local 150, which represents public service workers in North Carolina, is circulating a petition demanding local governments protect their workers from the heat. 200 custodial and plant services workers who recently organized with the Teamsters at Richmond Public Schools in Virginia ratified their first union contract, which includes 22% raises over 3 years, significant increases to paid time off, and more. National Nurses United, NNU members at SSM Health in St. Louis, Missouri, remember, where a decertification petition was just filed, just voted to ratify a new contract that includes raises of between 17 and 40% over the 3-year term, along with the safe staffing provisions and no concessions. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably the decertification petition will, the workers, after getting a 40% raise, are not going to decertify their union. Knock on wood. Hundreds of Communication Workers of America members, CWA, who work at AT&T rallied in Atlanta last week ahead of the contract expiration on August 3rd, which is today. The contract covers thousands of workers in the southeastern United States, and the workers in that bargaining unit went on strike in 2019. That was my first picket line that I ever walked on. United Airlines unilaterally changed the sick leave policy for flight attendants, and American Association, Association of Flight Attendants, AFA. I lost the abbreviation for a second. The AFA is challenging the new change as a violation of their contract. The union is in the middle of a strike authorization vote right now. The News Guild successfully negotiated and ratified more than 90 first contracts at new units in just the last 12 months, many of which are in the South. The National Education Association, NEA, is continuing to lock out its unionized staff of more than 300, now for more than 20 days, although they did backtrack their threat to cut the health insurance after much backlash. In political and legislative updates, a Baldwin-Rubio amendment to the Senate Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill passed last week. The amendment inserts Teamsters-supported language into it to prohibit federal funding from going to Chinese state-owned transit bus manufacturers. Anti-worker Senator Mike Lee put forward legislation to attempt to take away yet another right from government workers that workers and union members typically have in the private sector, that is, paid time to perform representational functions. AFGE President Everett Kelly lambasted the bill. The UAW endorsed Kamala Harris for president last week. The U.S. House of Representatives held a hearing on rail safety last week where union members said they are regularly told by management that, quote, "we're in the business of moving freight, not fixing rail cars," and that the rail company's, quote, "quarterly profits are the most essential goal over anything else, including safety." U.S. Senator from Alabama Katie Britt, a member of the supposedly pro-free speech Republican Party, put forward a bill in the U.S. Senate to bar the federal government from working with contractors who boycott Israel. The Huntsville City School Board voted to approve a teacher's bill of rights that gives teachers the authority to exclude disruptive students. I thought they could do that already. The same folks that own the Russell Erskine in Huntsville, which let its elderly tenants go without AC in Alabama for as long as 2 years, is also accused of not maintaining apartments at Mayfair Towers in Huntsville, which is another HUD-subsidized complex for low-income elderly folks. I say the city should just take over the apartments and not pay the landlords. The city of Madison in Alabama is looking at adopting new, quote, market-aligned pay scales, which reportedly have not been updated since 2007, that would see $2.2 million in raises for the first year for the city's 400 employees. The state of Alabama jails more people than every single country in the world except one, according to a new report. Matt Brunig has a good breakdown of what the challenge to the NLRB's constitutionality revolves around and makes the point that even as the case is decided, however it's decided, there will be years of damage, because while we wait, potentially for years, for the litigation to work its way through the process, the NLRB will be unable to operate in any state covered by a federal circuit court that follows what the Fifth Circuit has done. Efforts to process cases in those areas will be met with preliminary injunctions from federal district courts that halt the agency from acting until the final outcome of this case. So for all intents and purposes, these workers and unions operating in these areas, which is primarily the U.S. South, will have no protections during this period. The state of Texas continues its case to close a Catholic migrant shelter. Friend of the show, Flash, on America's Workforce, spoke to Livia Shmovonian, director of the Made in America office within the Office of Management and Budget of the White House, about the new department, what it does, and the investments made under the Biden-Harris administration. Unions, including the American Federation of Teachers, have come out in favor of the Biden-Harris Supreme Court reforms, and a new Louisiana law will allow cops to tell people filming that they must get back at least 25 feet or face arrest, because Louisiana Republicans love the First Amendment, obviously. And finally, in internal union affairs, the National Fast Food Workers Union, SEIU, is hiring a Durham, North Carolina-based full-time organizer. You can apply online. If we missed anything, you can let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we will include it on next week's roundup. We're going to take a break and be right back, and going to be talking to Corey Walton, host of From A to Arbitration, which is a podcast about educating educating union members, particularly in the National Association of Letter Carriers, about how to be a good union member, and it has turned into basically the news source to go to for news within the NALC, and they have a convention next week, so we want to get the breakdown from Corey. We're going to get that coming up. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can participate in our live chat on Facebook and YouTube. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Got a lot of presumably letter carriers watching us on YouTube. Really looking forward to talk to Corey Walton from A to Arbitration. I do have a very quick story, as I typically do, from the international scene. Before we get to Corey, going to be about 3 minutes. This one, GM workers in Brazil have gone on multiple strikes, and the American United Auto Workers Union are supporting them. 2 weeks ago, General Motors laid off 50 workers at their São José dos Campos location in Brazil, where some 3,150 workers produce GM's Trailblazer and S10 models, as well as engines and transmissions. GM claimed that the 50 laid-off workers were, quote, part of the company's restructuring plan and strategy to reduce its payroll, unquote, according to the Metal Workers Union, which represents the workers at the facility. However, the union points out that the company only recently hired 70 new employees. The union says this, quote, makes it clear that the company's strategy involves firing employees with higher salaries and hiring others with lower salaries, rather than an actual need to restructure and reduce payroll. Further, the UAW notes that GM has amassed over $10 billion in profits in 2023 alone, and that the company looks poised to have an even stronger year in 2024. The Brazilian Metal Workers Union also pointed out that the company's net profit grew 14% in the second quarter of this year. A 14% increase in profit in one quarter that's crazy. That's bonkers. And then, according to General Motors itself, the quarterly improvement was driven by strong performance in Brazil. After GM carried out the layoffs, which were not negotiated with the union, 2,000 metalworkers in production decided to stop work on July 26th. The strike took place inside the factory from 1 to 3 p.m. after an internal meeting with the union. Around 50 cars, including the S10 and Trailblazer models, stopped being produced. The workers struck again for 2 hours on Monday morning, July 29th. The union is demanding the reinstatement of the 50 dismissed workers, job security, and, if dismissals really are unavoidable, that a voluntary dismissal program be launched. So far, they have secured job security for the remaining employees at the facility until at least September 30th. It's unclear to us if the 50 laid off workers have gotten their jobs back. It seems like they have, but I'm not super clear from the press releases from the Brazilian union. But the workers did vote in an assembly meeting last week to suspend the rolling strikes. This from the acting president of the union, Valmir Mariano. Now we are going to throw all of our strength into the salary campaign and pressure the company to ensure that our demands are met. The strike has been suspended, but the fight to defend jobs continues. Their salary campaign, which began earlier in the month of July, demands a raise of 10.5%. In their statement, the UAW said, the UAW stands in solidarity with striking auto workers at the General Motors assembly plant in São José dos Campos, Brazil. Workers at the facility are protesting the company's recent unjust layoffs and retaliatory firings, decisions that were made in the name of corporate greed. What's been made evidently clear by these arbitrary decisions is that GM is attempting to union bust and cut labor costs at a time when the company is raking in billions of dollars. This type of behavior by General Motors is unnecessary and unconscionable, says UAW Vice President Mike Booth. There is absolutely no reason why this corporation should be cutting jobs that will so negatively affect the lives of its workers in the local community at a time of record profits. The UAW is committed to supporting these brave workers and the Metal Workers Union in any way that we can. So, wanted to share that with you. Now, Corey Walton is on the line. Corey Walton is a letter carrier. I believe, if I remember correctly, I listened to several episodes of his podcast last week. He said he's a 31-year letter carrier. He's also host of the podcast From Aid to Arbitration. Corey, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Good morning. It's great to be here. How are you?
It's great to have you. I'm doing great. I appreciate you taking the time. We've heard lots of good things from you over the years from letter carriers here in Huntsville, and we really appreciate the work that you're doing. And so if you could just take a moment to introduce yourself and some of your history in the NALC, any offices that you have and the podcast and what it's kind of turned into.
Absolutely. First off, I love your passion. We need more of that around the country as far as labor is concerned. But I'm a 32-year letter carrier, and I started with the union back in 2006. Became a shop steward of my station. I'm still the shop steward at that same station. I still deliver mail. And so we've tried to do this before, but I work on Saturdays, so I have annual leave today, so we're able to make it happen. So and I'm finally glad to be on here to talk to you folks. But yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, started doing arbitrations in 2012. Became an advocate for the NALC, and so like if you were to get fired, I'd be the last face you'd see. So I started doing that in 2012. Also was on the National Safety Committee for the NALC. Would fly to Washington every quarter, and we'd deal with the issues at the national and headquarters level as far as safety is concerned. Started this podcast From Aid to Arbitration about 3 years ago. And when I started it, it was solely for the education of city letter carriers, shop stewards, filing grievances, making sure those grievances were ready for arbitration. Hence, From Aid to Arbitration from the very beginning, informal step A all the way up to arbitration. And so I thought that was a clever name. And so it's kind of stuck. And but like you say, it's kind of changed here a little bit lately because of the failures of my union to represent us and to put competent leadership out there for us. And so, yeah, it has definitely changed a little bit. And I thought it was funny when y'all sent me the message. The first thing you said was no cursing. If any of my people are listening and they're like, he's completely different on here, well, y'all put the gag order on me, no cursing. And so, it's turned into that, and so it's kind of become a little militant here lately. But man, we need better representation for this union. We are suffering right now. So yeah.
Like you said to me, I appreciate your passion, but we are, like I said in the email, on terrestrial radio, so we have the FCC censors shackling us. So we do have to we have to be clean, PG. But this. We can kind of go back to your roots for just a little bit as far as, just educating people generally about unions and unionism. And you talked about trying to kind of demystify the arbitration process and the grievance process. And that's all incredibly important. And there's an opportunity here to do that with the just explain to us the convention that's happening next week in Boston for the National Association of Letter Carriers. There's a lot of folks who are not members of unions who definitely don't understand the importance of it, but even some people who are in unions, the National Convention, what's going on there, why is it important, et cetera, et cetera.
I know this is going to sound crazy if you've ever listened to my podcast, but when I first started the Postal Service, I did not believe in unions. I was anti-union. And not that was the way I was raised, but I always felt like the union just is there to protect those that would normally be fired. And so I wasn't even in the union. And but over the years, you see that there's nothing more critical than a union. And I heard you talking before about all these different things that are going on. The union is absolutely critical. And I have learned that the hard way along the way because, they came after me when I was a carrier, and that's when I got in the union, and because I hadn't done anything wrong. But I recognized the importance of the union probably back in '98, I believe I joined the union. And I was one of those that you're talking about. And quickly, when I became in the union, I saw the importance of it because, believe it or not, the Postal Service is the most mismanaged organization in the country. I would put it up against anybody as far as it being mismanaged. And if we didn't have the union in the Postal Service, we'd probably be making about $10 an hour. And that's not a joke. But the convention is every 2 years. We'll be going to Boston next week. And I see a lot of people on social media, a lot of carriers talking about it's just a big party and just a waste of money. And it's a week of annual. We go up there and just a hobnob. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. A lot of people that have gripes and complaints about the Constitution, about resolutions, that's where that stuff happens. And so it's absolutely one of the most important things that the union does are these conventions. Because that's where resolutions are passed. That's where the Constitution can be changed. If you don't like something, if you don't like working conditions, that's where those things are addressed and adopted, if so. And so, it's absolutely critical, the National Convention. And so I've come a long way since the beginning of my tenure at the Postal Service, to not even being in the union to leading this podcast and being so militarized. But I understand the importance of the union. There's nothing more critical than a good, healthy, strong union. Absolutely.
Well, and I think that your work with the podcast has really helped a lot of folks. We just had somebody in the chat. Calvin said, Corey's inspired me to keep fighting. He's educated me more than anyone in the union to date. FATA also led me to Mike Cariff from ADA Arbitration, also led me to Mike Cariff. Let's go Cariff for president in 2026. That's a great explanation of national conventions, and they are really important. I think that your members that may have this idea about conventions as just one big party that's really just a bunch of BS and a waste of dues money. They get that from a reality that exists where that is kind of what happens in many unions. Unfortunately, the National Convention, even though it is the highest deliberative body of the union, and lots of important things happen there and can happen there, a lot of times, and particularly this is, in the interest of some union leadership who don't want to see an engaged union really kind of debating about the future of the organization. Sometimes it is devolved into like a big party and vacation and things like this, right? So it doesn't come from nowhere, but nevertheless, it is a very important place and one of the few places where you can organize and kind of change the direction of your union nationally and internationally if you're in an international union. But you spoke about some of the dysfunction that you've seen develop in the NALC over the years. And so if you could, we only have you for a little bit, for about 30 minutes. And so we'll have to kind of keep it short. You spoke, one of your recent podcasts was like 3.5 hours. So we'll have to keep it pretty compressed. If folks want to learn more, they can go to From A to Arbitration, anywhere you get podcasts, and listen to some more detail. But what are some of the highlights of some of the things that you and members are the most frustrated with from the NALC over the last few years?
Yeah, I would say that and it's funny you say that because I always tell my listeners, I was like, I'm gonna make this a short episode, and it'll be 3 hours long because I get to. You're gonna have to make sure I stay reined in, okay? And so, but I would say that one of the biggest examples would be this HIP training that management is required to do every April 1st. And it's heat illness prevention training. And we had a death of a brother down in Dallas, Mr. Gates. And I don't know if you've heard that episode. I don't know how many you listened to, but he passed away due to the heat. And this gentleman was on the verge of retirement. And the first thing that management came out and said was it kind of put the blame on him, where they said that he had received this HIP training. So there's no reason for this to happen, basically, only to find out that management falsified his HIP training. And we have found over this country, a majority of the carriers' training had been falsified. Management went in and said that the carriers had received training when in fact they didn't. And so that was one of the biggest things I was railing on, was the fact that we need to do something nationally, whether we need to get out into the streets and mobilize on behalf of not only our brother, Mr. Gates, who passed away, but because of how management was treating our safety issues. That's just one example as far as the safety issues are concerned. But our president refused to acknowledge that this training was first falsified, and the fact that we needed to get in the streets and mobilize and let the people of the country know what was going on as far as our working conditions. And so I was irate about that. I thought that our president should be presidential and be out front and take us into the streets and let the public know that our working conditions are third world country type things. We had an email that I read on one of my episodes the other day where one of the managers, an upper management, sent out an email stating that they wanted us out of the office in an hour. That's completely fabricated. They made that up. Well, he sends out an email and said, everybody wants to stay in the cool air. Cut the air conditioner off on the letter carriers and force them out of the office.
Wow.
And so that's what we deal with all the time. Brother, I could stay on here for 4 hours telling you examples of stuff like that. But our president is non-existent. We also have this route adjustment process. And this is the other thing that, and then these are just two examples I'll give you, and then I'll let you get back to it. But in this route adjustment process, he signed off on it. It will be a mutual process. We were going to be working with management. First off, you don't ever do that because they're never honest. They will always screw that up. And so in this memo, he starts putting these times down, a load time where we load our vehicle every day. And that they can watch us on the street with these new scanners we have, that they can sit in their office and watch us on the street jointly. You never do that. You don't say a letter carrier can be watched on the street without actually going out there and watching them. And these load times, you never put times on memos because management will bastardize that every time. And that's exactly what happened. I've been here 32 years and I've never seen it as bad as it is today, with the carriers being bullied, intimidated, pushed around based off of these memos and the times that this idiotic president has put on there. And the fact that they're watching us now, questioning us, berating us as far as stationary events, on the street when they've not done it. They're sitting in the office watching us on a TV screen. And so we'd have to get in more into that in depth so people understand what I'm talking about. But any carrier listening knows what I'm talking about. But he's completely screwed that up. You never open the door for management to watch us sitting inside the office. There's a requirement for them to go to the street and watch us, and they don't do it. They're too lazy. And so, yeah, that's just a couple of examples of his complete failures as far as the letter carrier is concerned.
Well, and now you have been, I wrote 400 days, but I think now it's actually 500 days, if I recall from one of your more recent episodes, 500 days without a contract or with working under an expired contract. How did that happen?
Well, you're baiting me, aren't you? You said you didn't want me to curse.
Well, you can, yeah. You'll have you'll have to try to maybe speak slowly.
That's it. Well, I don't know if you know, but there are charges brought up against our president, and one of them was he went AWOL at the beginning of our contract negotiations. This is his very first contract. He just got elected. And so he went AWOL on us. He just left. Nobody knew where he was at. He shows up like, I don't know how many months later. He just walks back in like, hey, what y'all been doing? Well, hell, we don't have a contract. It's been going on for almost 500 days without a contract. And about 10 months ago, he starts putting out, we're a couple of weeks away. We're right there, a couple of weeks. Just have a few things that we're still working on. A couple of weeks away. That was about 10 months ago. And then he says, hey, we're going to go lock ourselves down with labor, with management. This was a couple of weeks, about a month ago. And we're not coming out until we have a tentative agreement. Well, he came out with no tentative agreement. And so now he's saying it's hours away. We're hours away. And hell, I got the convention starting Monday. And so I think that it's directly responsible for him. I know that there are a lot on social media that say, hey, this happens all the time. It has never been like this before, man. This dude is completely incompetent. And so to me, the reason for the delay is that he was AWOL on us when it first started. And I think that management's taken advantage of him and his inexperience.
And, that going that long without a contract means that letter carriers have been without a raise for that whole time. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's the sad part about it, my friend, is that we have no disrespect to anybody, no disrespect, but we have carriers starting at fast food wages. This is a federal employment job, a federal government job. When I first started and you told people you were employed with the Postal Service, man, you're rich. You have it made. But we have carriers living in their cars, union halls having to put in showers so that they can take showers because they're having to live out of their cars. Our wages are fast food when you start out, completely unacceptable. And we got carriers that are hurting. And it's a nonchalant attitude by our leadership right now that has pissed a lot of people off, man. and they're militant right now and extremely angry. And I don't blame them. We have terrible working conditions at the Postal Service, absolutely horrible. And abhorrent. And I just I wish that 2 years can't get here fast enough, man. Get rid of this dude.
2 years is the next election for presidency of the NALC. So we're going to be. I'm going to ask you some about what some of the efforts are to push back against against this kind of complacent attitude towards management. But another big picture question before we talk about that is DeJoy and his kind of 10-year plan to revitalize, quote unquote, revitalize the Postal Service. It really does not seem like, I mean, from any of the unions, I mean, the APWU has been fighting on some of it, but it looks like I just have not seen a whole lot of pressure from the postal unions against DeJoy and his 10-year plan just generally. I mean, we're 4 years into a Biden administration. I had just assumed when Biden got into office that DeJoy would not last his whole term. I thought that especially after he fired Peter Robb with the NLRB, I just kind of took it for granted that there's no way he's going to keep DeJoy, this, private sector logistics CEO executive who wants to kind of destroy the Postal Service and sell it for scraps. How is he going to last the whole Biden administration? And here we are 100 days from its end, and he's still here, and he's still with us. Should the union be more oppositional to DeJoy and this kind of broader 10-year plan, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that can work when you bring in somebody from the outside. I think if you look at Marvin Runyon, they called him Carbon Marvin Runyon, but when he came in, he said that if you're not touching the mail, you should be concerned about your job. Well, union members touch the mail. Union, those that are in the union touch the mail, whether you're through the clerk craft, whatever. The rural carriers, city carriers, they touch the mail. He said, if you're not touching the mail, you should be worried about your job. The union is crazily top heavy. There's so much fat in this union. Of course, it's federal government. I mean, in the Postal Service, of course, it's federal government, so you can understand that there's going to be a lot of waste. But I think that DeJoy has done a good job of selling both sides, Republicans, Democrats, on the 10-year plan. I think that he's done a good job of selling the unions on the 10-year plan. So if it makes sense, it makes sense, regardless of who he is. I think that there are things in there that we should have pushed back on, and we are not. These S&DCs, if you look at those, that's these huge hubs where they're bringing in all these outside post offices and they're bringing them into one location. That is completely screwing over the city letter carrier. And we've had no pushback whatsoever from our union. Now, you've got David Groskoff up in Buffalo. He's going to be on the CLC ticket, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, he railed on it, and he did win. And so that shows you what a fighter David Groskoff is, but it's too far and few between on that. But, there are some things that we definitely should have pushed back on. Like I said, but I think he's done a very good job of selling the 10-year plan to the unions and to, Congress and Senate. And so here we are. So I guess it's just a wait and see approach. But there are definitely some things that we should have pushed back on, like David did up there in Buffalo.
And so some unions or some folks within the union are trying to organize to change things, both in running against some of the current leadership, and also putting forward resolutions at the convention. The two groups that have emerged primarily, as far as I can see, are Build a Fighting NALC (BFN) and Concerned Letter Carriers (CLC). I think that you are. If not the founder, you are more closely associated with CLC. But the two groups are, they're friendly and cooperative, and there's not really, division there. So what does each group do? What are the differences? I mean, there's obviously some differences between the two groups, because there are, by virtue of the fact that there are two groups. So what is the deal with each group, and what do they want to do, and what are their differences, and how did they kind of emerge?
Yeah. I had nothing to do with the founding of the CLC. That's a completely different thing. Mr. Guzman out of California kind of started that, and then they kind of came to me, asked if I'd be a part of that, and I said yes. And so, but it's came out of people that are extremely frustrated with our leadership right now, and that's obviously that's growing. But yeah, I have nothing to do with them except that I'm on their ticket. And so, the concerned letter carrier movement, CLC, the difference between them and Build a Fighting NALC is that we're running for elected office. We're actually putting a ticket together. And we're running for elected positions. And so the Build a Fighting NALC, they're not.
I see.
When you look at city letter carriers, you have those that want change, those that expect change, but then you have those that demand change. That's Build a Fighting NALC. They're a militant movement based out of Minneapolis, and they're growing by leaps and bounds with Tyler Vassar kind of as the figurehead there, but they're demanding change, and they're not waiting on it. And so, like I said, so many different movements that come out of the lack of leadership right now and the complete failure of the top two in our union, especially our president, who is, God bless him, just fallen on his face since he's been in office. But that's the difference. The concerned letter carriers, it's a very militant movement, but we're running for elected positions, and Build a Fighting NALC is not. They're kind of, they're putting, you talked about at the convention, resolution on open bargaining, and that's their big thing right now is open bargaining. They think that our bargaining should be open so that the members know exactly what we're doing. Our union, as it is now, is tight-lipped about those things. We have no idea what we're asking for, what we're looking for. Been almost 500 days. Only updates we get are, hey, we're a couple of weeks away. We're still trying to hammer things out. To me, that's kind of, when you turn on the lights and the cockroaches go running, that's kind of how that is. They're trying to keep things hidden from us, and I don't like that. I don't want to know what your game plan is. I don't know what your blueprint is, how you're going to go about arguing these things, but you can let us know things that are going on.
Right.
That's where Build a Fighting NALC is saying, hey, we need open bargaining, like a lot of unions do. And the CLC's kind of coming in, we our kind of thing is the lion. I love that visual when you say, those that are on the same mission as me, and kind of adopted the lion as that. And so I love that, because when I tell my members or the listeners that the lions are coming, that's what we're talking about. We're here. We're here, and we're going to be in Boston in force, and so we'll put on a show. So, yeah.
This convention really is shaping up to be much different than many union conventions, much more contentious and real kind of vigorous debate. Hopefully it all remains civil and you are able to kind of debate the different positions and things like this in a civil and kind of brotherly and sisterly way. But definitely going to be some arguments on the floor is kind of my expectation. Open bargaining has really been something that has been out there more, especially after the Teamsters and the UPS both really kind of pioneered it on a national level. I mean, we haven't seen something like that in a long time on a national level. And I think people really liked it. And I think, intuitively after seeing it, it makes sense because people say, and I have talked to old heads who I've got a lot of respect for, and I have no inkling that there's any kind of like negative motivations or ulterior motives or anything. I believe that these people who told me this, what I'm about to say, they want the best for their members and they're doing what they think is right and all this kind of stuff. But, there's some old heads out there that are genuinely scared of open bargaining. But I think if you haven't grown up or come of age, so to speak, as a unionist in a period where closed bargaining was the norm, and you can just kind of see the differences between these two approaches with fresh eyes, open bargaining and closed bargaining, closed bargaining as a unionist just does not really make sense, right? I mean, I am a union member because I have a problem with authority. I have a problem with being told what to do and how to do it without an explanation. And I want to be a part, have a voice in what happens to me in my workplace. And that's like the whole thing. That's like the whole thing. The whole reason I'm in a union is because I believe I deserve a voice, right? And so closed bargaining really kind of explicitly, in my view, undermines a very core reason to be a union member. But, nevertheless, I got kind of on a tangent there. There's going to be some other there's going to be some other resolutions that are put forward next week besides the one on open bargaining, which I hope that one wins. Hope that one passes. What are some of the other resolutions that you're expecting to see in Boston next week?
Well, I know that the CLC is going to attempt to appeal the charges brought against our president, and that's probably most of the hubbub is going to be right there. If you're going to talk about a very tumultuous time, is when the CLC is going to attempt to appeal these charges that were brought against our president, because he has recently come out and said that he is not going to let us appeal those, that he's protecting himself. And so we say that he doesn't have that right. So we're going to appeal those charges to the body, and the supreme body, who is the ruling body, who's number one as far as the pecking order, is the members. And, we pay his salary. So I appreciate him sending out that letter saying, hey, I'm not going to let y'all bring this appeal up against me, but it's happening.
Right.
I don't know what to tell him. It's happening. So that's going to be the biggest thing. And so, it's going to be a fun time.
And if folks want to hear, more about that, definitely I would recommend going and checking out, because that letter that you read on your show is kind of bizarre. You had a guest on that said that one of the quotes from the letter that was ostensibly from the Constitution was just straight up not in the Constitution, which is a pretty bold strategy. Just making up stuff. And so, that's, I think, pretty funny. If the charges are appealed and are accepted, and the delegates vote that he's guilty on all those charges, what is the remedy proposed for that? I mean, are we talking impeachment of Renfro here, Brian Renfro, the national president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, or some other remedy?
Yeah, we want him gone. We want him removed. And he can go back to delivering mail. He didn't spend a whole lot of time on the floor. That will give him an opportunity to get back on the floor, learn some things as far as how he represents city letter carriers. I think it would be a good opportunity for him to go back to delivering mail and, kind of educate himself on how to defend us, because he was not educated. He came up kind of on the coattails of some people. He never had to fight for anything. And hell, here he is, the president of, to me, the mightiest union there is the NALC. And so, we're going to ask that he be gone, that he be pack his stuff up. We can go up there and help him pack, and have him go back to delivering mail if that's what he wants to do.
Somebody in the chat said that there's a rumor going around that Renfro is now on board with open bargaining, which would be a very interesting that would be an interesting dynamic to play out at the convention. Another thing that you mentioned on your podcast that I just wanted to put out there was that y'all are you and your listeners are planning on all wearing From A to Arbitration t-shirts on Wednesday at the convention, and you have heard a lot of people saying that some of their leadership has said they can't do that, or they'll be kicked out, or told to change shirts. And just as a public service announcement to the people that are listening, we've got several of your listeners tuning in right now. My understanding, not legal advice, but my understanding is that is they can't do that because under the LMRDA, there is a Union Members Bill of Rights, which includes a free speech provision, which includes the guaranteed ability of union members to criticize their leadership, to speak at union meetings and conventions and things like this, unharassed and things like this. And so obviously the reason that they would stop you from wearing a From A to Arbitration t-shirt is because of the implicit criticism there. And you are guaranteed. You have a right to criticize your union under the LMRDA. That's federal law. So I think they cannot do that, but not legal advice. So but take that for what it is. It seems like, based on your recent episodes, that you are pretty confident, at least on Renfro losing in 2026, and you're also seems like you're reasonably confident about open bargaining passing and the appealing these charges passing, and so I'm just wondering if you have been part of some of the whipping of votes at the of the convention delegates, and if you have kind of an estimated vote count already in your head that makes you confident, or what is it that's kind of informing your assessment of the state of play for the convention.
Not that you should share all your cards by any means. He's not asking you to do that, of course.
Yeah, Renfro will lose in 2026. He will not be the president. He's one and done, and I'm 100% confident of that. He will not be our president again. He had an opportunity, and he failed miserably, and he continues to fail. That's the problem, is that he's not learning. And so I think that I did read that. I saw that coming out about the open bargaining. And so that's very interesting right here before the convention. I don't know whether that's a Band-Aid or what, or an olive branch or whatever. But if we can get the appeals heard, I believe that we'll be successful. That's the rub right there, is that I don't know what they're going to try to do as far as kick us out. Have the sergeant at arms come out or whatever, arrest us or whatever for trying to get these appeals heard. But, like I said, that could be the most tumultuous time. Open bargaining, I believe, if it's allowed to be explained without somebody calling the question immediately, I believe that if people understood that and heard that out, that they would also adopt that. But yeah, you just never know, though, about the members. I've not done any kind of, when you look at these national elections, they're saying, these polls. I've not done that. Just kind of my pulse of the carrier, city carrier, through things that were sent to me and things that I read and see. It looks like a majority are for those things. And so that's basically where I base that off of. Now, you could get in there to the convention and, obviously things can happen. You'd be surprised, but yeah.
Well, like you said, we will see. The convention starts on Monday. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So we'll be able to have a report of one form or another on our next program a week from today. So look forward to kind of seeing what happens at the convention. Before we let you go, is there anything else that you want to, leave our listeners with? People who are rank and file letter carriers, people who may be going to the convention on Monday. What are some of your kind of closing thoughts about the state of the NALC and the convention coming up?
Yeah, you mentioned Mike Cariff earlier. He's another one that has decided he's going to throw his hat into the ring as far as challenging for a presidency. Mike and I are very good friends. He's a business agent out of Region 3, which covers Chicago. And I love that guy. And he's also running for president. You have CLC, Concerned Letter Carriers. You got James Henry, who will be the president of that, and he'll be the next president of the NALC. You got David Groskoff, like I said, will be on there. That's a thumper. That dude is something. And so hopefully everybody get to meet him. Howard Comine out of Hawaii, a trustee, and you got Walter McGregor. We'll all be there as well for the CLC. But yeah, there may be several more come out, because they see that Renfro is weak. And so if you ever wanted to be a president, right now is the time to throw your hat in the ring.
Right.
He's not going to be it. But yeah, I think that if you've never been, there's going to be over 10,000 people there. It's very intimidating for the first time.
10,000?
Oh, yeah. There'll be about 10,000 people. Yeah, in Boston. And you ought to come, man. Look at it. Check it out. But we'll get your
president to fly us up there.
Well, he loves spending our money, so hell, he'll do it. But anyway, yeah, it'll be quite the scene, man. I'll do an episode a day. Y'all can listen to that. It won't be very long, and I'll hold off on the cursing for you. But yeah, man, it's interesting times with the NALC, man. It's interesting times, but better days are ahead. I know that for a fact. You got people that are going to put the city letter carrier first. They're going to take back over. To me, I've always say two things: put the city letter carrier first and love us. If you do those two things, you'll be highly successful. Even if you fail, you'll be successful because we got your back. you love me, you love the people in blue, light blue, and you put us first, brother, we're on the right track, and that's coming. It's happening.
One thing that I just thought about was the BFN is pushing for a right to strike. Is that something that they're going to put in a resolution? Are they going to put that forward as a resolution, or is that something separate that is just kind of part of their general platform?
Right. Well, in our Constitution, it doesn't prohibit that, I don't believe. And, it's just that we stay away from that.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, that would be very interesting. We try to stay away from that talk, striking and because management, they'll try to terminate you on the spot. And,
right.
And they say it's against the law and all these things. Of course, our very, Sombrado, who is kind of the greatest president we've ever had. He struck, back in 1970 for our working conditions and our better wages and things like that. Yeah, I think that you can do things without striking. I think you can mobilize the city carriers. I think that you can mobilize them to get into the streets and bring awareness to the working conditions. I don't know that you need to shut off delivery to the entire country. That may piss some people off because you got elderly people that are looking for their medications and stuff like that. And I think you can turn the public against you very quickly. We are a very respected federal organization, the city letter carrier, and people love us. They want to see us. When COVID came, the entire world shut down, and here we are still delivering mail. We never missed a day. And so people remember that, and they understand that they need us and we need them. And so I don't know about striking. I think that you can mobilize and get in the streets and bring awareness to our working conditions. Like I said, brother, I could come on here and do a 6-hour episode for you on working conditions, and y'all wouldn't believe it. If I wrote a book, people wouldn't believe what was in it because of the working conditions and what we're having to deal with right now. But it's happening, baby. We're going to bring awareness to everybody. And so, yeah, I don't know about striking. I just think that there's a lot of things that we can do to bring awareness to our cause rather than shut off service to the entire country.
Right, and I'm sure that even though they believe that you should have the right to strike, I'm sure that even they would only recommend it as a last resort for all the reasons that you laid out. So Corey Walton, really appreciate your time. Check out, folks, From A to Arbitration anywhere you find your podcasts. It's a really great program, especially if you're a letter carrier. On your way out, make sure that you like the stream if you're Corey's listeners, but you should stay around. We got some more good stuff. But if you don't like the stream on your way out, Corey Walton, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, my man. Hey, y'all have me on any time. I'll take some more annual leave on a Saturday, and I'll get on here with you.
There you go. Sounds good, brother. All right, we'll talk soon. Again, that was Corey Walton, a letter carrier from Nashville, Tennessee, Southern Unionist. Love to talk to folks down here in the South. Host of From A to Arbitration, shop steward, and member of the Concerned Letter Carriers. Going to be running for the national business agent for his region. So we're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back. We're going to be talking to David Webster, the Director of Organizing for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, about some of the work that they have going on in Huntsville. So make sure you stay tuned for that. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio program, and, frankly, as far as I'm aware, the only union talk radio program in Kentucky and Louisiana, where we are also on the air. Folks, we are the only union radio program everywhere we are on the radio. Also, the largest union radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you would like to call in, we will be opening the lines shortly. We have a whole second half of the program that begins at 11. We will take calls at that time, so get the number ready. 844-899-TVLR would be interested in hearing from you, particularly if you're a letter carrier. We also We do have a fundraising campaign going on right now, tvlr.fm/union2024. You can donate there or buy some merch from us at tvlr.fm/store. We've got a really cool matchbox. We have a really cool new shirt design. We also have some extras of these that I'm wearing right now, the Join a Union t-shirt and our logo cap. Got a bunch of logo caps sitting in my garage. So tvlr.fm/store if you'd like to buy any of those. Up next, we've got David Webster. David Webster is the Director of Organizing for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. David, welcome to the program.
Good morning. How are you, Jacob?
I'm doing good, brother. It's great to have you. So the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, can you tell us what your members do?
Sure. So I'll speak to what, here at District Council 77, what we primarily represent are industrial painters, commercial painters, drywall finishers, and glazers. Our industrial painters are anywhere in, facilities such as paper mills, chemical facilities, to nuclear facilities, blasting and spraying. And our glazers are just, all over the map, the guys installing glass.
Gotcha. And what is a glazer? What does that mean?
So, in a nutshell, it's just a glass guy, right? Somebody who can do everything from revolving doors to cutting, glass mirrors. But a big portion of our guys are the guys that are building these big base buildings, right? Installing the exterior of the building, whether that's storefront or curtain wall. We do a lot of doors, anything to do with commercial or residential glass primarily.
And what are, I know that, working for different contractors, having different contracts, things are going to be different, but could you give us just a general expectation of what a member of IUPAT would make as a journeyman? What does the kind of typical compensation package look like?
Yeah, sure. So if we're talking painting, right, we represent 7 different states here in the Southeast, Alabama being one of them. And you're absolutely correct, right? CBAs and contracts differ. But in Alabama, we're looking at anywhere from $23.51 to $37 and some change overall for painters, right? That kind of depends on what area they're working in, whether it's a private shop or, at the arsenal. Pretty good wages considering, we do a market analysis and try to figure out what the industry's going rates are. Pretty competitive. As far as glazing, right, their package overall is, hold on, I'll tell you that real quick, $33.63 on the check and $40.35 overall with their fringes and their benefits, insurance and pension, annuities such as.
And so the insurance and the pension, that's something that particularly in the construction trades, if you're not in a union, is going to be something that you're less likely to have. Talk to us a little bit about the insurance and the pension. What do those benefits look like?
Sure. So, I can just give you a personal example. Before I joined, I was non-union, having to work a couple jobs, right, to stay afloat with my family. Did not have insurance for me or my wife. It was rough. After I joined, I had my insurance. I had an injury, major injury, had to have some surgeries. And, me being a first-time insurance holder at my age, I didn't know how that was going to look. And I was only like a few $100s out of pocket. The surgery probably would have cost me upwards of $80,000. So it's competitive insurance. You know how the insurance is across the industry, but we fight really hard for our members to make sure that their benefits are good. The pension is, what it is. It's a retirement fund set up for you. It is insured, right? Once you're vested, you're guaranteed that, money that you put in there. And then we also, some of our glazers at least, and have annuity program. which is essentially almost like a 401k as well on top of that pension. So something that you can fall back on when you retire. You can just sit at that mailbox and wait for that check.
And so, with that kind of general, introduction to the union and what you can expect to kind of get from being a member and working as an IUPAT painter or glazer, I heard through the grapevine that y'all have people running around in Huntsville. So I said, Will, you need to talk to us, need to let us know what's going on. So what's going on? What are y'all doing in Huntsville?
Yeah, so several years ago, our international decided that they wanted to really put some resources into areas of the country that had very high construction rates going, like construction booms, a lot of work, but low union density. Here in our district council, we started off with Atlanta. We've done pretty well of going back and looking into that commercial market and recapturing some of it. So now it's not just a strategic city. We're going to be called a strategic council. So we chose a couple cities, and Huntsville being one of them. We were recently in Huntsville. We still are. Kind of doing a market analysis, seeing what the industry, what's happening in the industry and how the market's working out there. We'll be going back here in a couple weeks to look at the industrial painting and some of the commercial painting. Just trying to get our bearings in the city and see what's going on, make partnerships with other unions and municipalities, and see what the future holds for Huntsville.
And so right now you're kind of in an investigation phase. It's not so much that you're going out actively and trying to organize a particular contractor or work site. You're just trying to kind of get a feel for what's going on in the city, maybe some good targets. If people were to have information about that, say if I was a painter and I'm listening, we're on the radio, right now in Huntsville. So probably some people on some work sites are hearing us right now. If I'm listening and I'm a painter, I'm non-union, or even if I am union, where would I go to, how would I reach out to you and let you know what I know?
Sure. So there's several ways, right? We have our website, which is IUPAT DC 77. You can just put that into Google. It'll be the first link that pops up. We also have a Facebook page, which is IUPAT DC 77. And then if you're in Alabama particularly and you're a painter or you want to be a painter, you're interested and you just have questions, you can reach out to the rep in that area. His name is Josh Thompson, and his telephone number is 205-603-3142. Now, if you're interested in, being a glazer, that'll be a different rep that covers that industry. And their telephone number is 770-318-4376.
And so what would be some of the next steps if I, if I call or I reach out and I do want to be a union painter or a union glazer? What are some of the next steps? What does that look like? What does that process look like?
So it's pretty simple. You just reach out to those two numbers or go to the website. Give these guys a call. They'll get you an appointment to come in. We'll talk about what work is coming up, what you're interested in, what your experience is. And we'll get you started. So, some people come in, they have a whole lot of experience, right? They don't have to go through the apprenticeship program, but a lot of people come through and they do need to go through that apprenticeship program. So they'll have to join. It's really simple. You just fill out an application, answer a couple questions, and we'll get you on the list, right? To callbacks. The way it happened for me was I put in an application, in person and online. I got a call back 6 months later. Unfortunately, at the time, I just broke my leg. But, they called me back another 6 months and I was ready to go. And that's how it started, just filling an application. I think the perception of joining a union, a lot of people think it's very hard or, you got to pay money to get in, and all those things aren't true necessarily. We've kind of had to change the way we do things. Back in the day, it was really hard to join a union, let's be honest. And we kind of did that to ourselves. But the IUPAT, we want everyone to come in, apply, and join, and see where you fit in here, because there's a lot of work coming up. There's a lot of work going around, and we want you to be part of this union and be part of the family.
Yes, I agree. There are many unions where it is kind of difficult to get in, or it's more difficult than others. I will say that my union, AFGE, is not like that. In fact, we give folks a rebate when they join. You get a $100 check when you join the union. AFGE.org/join, and tell them that I referred you, and I'll get a $50 check. So they.
Oh wow.
But
that's a good deal.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal, that's for sure. So I think that's basically all we wanted. It was a pretty short interview, but y'all were in Huntsville, so I wanted to make sure that folks knew what was going on. And just as a final thing, there are If they go to you and they want to be a union painter, one of the ways to do that is to, you join the union and then you start working for a union contractor, one of your signatory contractors. And then you automatically jump in either to the apprenticeship program or as a journeyman if you're able to kind of show that whatever the process is, that you're good enough to be a journeyman union painter. But also, we were talking the other day, and you said that you and your union are interested not only in that, in recruitment to the union contractors, but also in organizing non-union contractors as well, and that you would be willing to work with folks to do that, in addition to recruiting them out of their non-union contractors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, what myself and my team does, organize, and we do that several ways, right? There's non-union companies out there who aren't aware of us or what we do. And we go in and talk to them, and, they like the idea of our training and, some of the partnerships that we do have, right? And it's beneficial for them to, become union, their company. But also there's a lot of workers out there who are working somewhere who aren't being treated the way they should be treated. And that's another reason to reach out to us, because that's what unions do. That's what we've been doing for a very long time. That's how we were started. Workers who are being mistreated or, not being paid correctly. I'll be honest, with the market analysis that we do, we see a lot of things in this industry, from wage theft to worker misclassification, worker intimidation, and those things just aren't right. This is 2024. There's options out there. And what we do is come in those circumstances and educate the workers on what their rights are, and we help them fight. So that's another way that we organize as well.
And that actually that gives me one more question. Something that IUPAT has been doing that I've been seeing, it's a fairly regular occurrence that I will see a press release like this. IUPAT wins $100,000 in back pay for some workers at this work site, or $150,000 for workers at another work site, $50,000 at a third work site. This back pay, wage theft, and misclassification, this kind of stuff, y'all help non-union painters in those kinds of cases as well. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We're going through several cases right now where workers were not paid their wages at all. When I say worker misclassification, it's just another fancy word for employers getting away with not paying overtime. And I don't care who you are, where you're from, what language you speak. If you work over 40 hours here in this country, you're supposed to get paid overtime. So yeah, we fight with them. The biggest thing is educating these workers on how they can fight for themselves. With us there helping. And yeah, we have been able to get a lot of back wages paid to these workers. Also, working with some of the workers, we've also been able to get them, it's called a process called deferred action, which could lead to, a lot of these workers are undocumented. So they feel like they don't have a voice. They feel like they don't have rights. But that's not true. So we get them through this process. If we can show that there has been wage theft or intimidation, sometimes they're granted deferred action, which leads to a work visa from 2 to 4 years.
That's great.
Yeah, that is great. That's awesome. David Webster, we're running up on a hard break, so appreciate your time. David Webster, Director of Organizing for IUPAT. You can learn more, IUPAT DC 77 online. Really appreciate your time and look forward to working with y'all more closely in Huntsville in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Keep up the fight, brother. Good show. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Adam, roll us out.
Yeah, we got a couple quick plugs. The first thing I wanted to mention is that Jacob and I were invited to Minion Death Cult podcast next week, and we really need some funny stuff to talk about. So if you see any crazy talk online about unions, send it our way. Your crazy uncle, Facebook memes, anything you see that's just really bizarre or would be fun to talk about when it comes to unions and social media discourse, send it our way. Do want to remind people that Labor Notes has a series of online trainings, as they always do. Great stuff. labornotes.org/events. Alabama Arise is in the middle of a summer membership blitz, trying to grow individual members. You can join with a donation of any amount at alarise.org. Thursday, August 8th at 6 p.m., the Southern Workers Assembly will be hosting an online event called Building Rank and File Power to Fight Fascism with Bill Fletcher Jr. You can go to southernworker.org/workerpower to register. And if you're a local union member in North Alabama and you'd like to get more involved, please reach out to us so we can get you plugged into the North Alabama Area Labor Council. Our next meeting is going to be Monday, August 19th in Madison.
All right, that's it for us today on the Valley Labor Report. We've got a second half of the show coming up. We have a lot to talk about. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you want to talk to us. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Okay, we are off the radio for now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We got like 60 people. Still, we had up to like 80 something while Corey was on. So make sure that if you have like 60 people right now though, and we still only have 47 people have liked the stream. What's going on? Like the stream if you haven't liked the stream. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed to the channel. Buy our merch, tvlr.fm/store, tvlr.fm/donate to make a one-time or recurring monthly contribution. Donate to our fundraiser, tvlr.fm/union2024. We're going to take a break really quick, and we'll be right back with the second half of the program where, folks, we got a lot to talk about. We'll be taking your calls at 844-899-8857. Also going to be talking about Disney workers getting a 30% raise, the UAW endorsing Kamala Harris. Richard Hanania doesn't understand unions. We're going to be talking about that. The Amazon Labor Union had their elections last week. A whole bunch of stuff. Stay tuned for Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Uh-oh. Got caught.
You got caught eating a Pop-Tart. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Welcome back, folks.
Yeah, folks, welcome back. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. You're listening to the second half of the program. Second half of the Valley Labor Report. We call it overtime. A whole nother half. All new stuff. It's not a replay. Different program, or a different part of the program. All new segments and interviews and things like that.
Absolutely.
We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Disneyland workers got a 30% raise. Really cool. They ratified their new contract. The UAW has endorsed Kamala Harris. The UAW has also weighed in on the Veep stakes. We're going to react to a clip of Richard Hanania, who is a former white supremacist, admitted former white supremacist, not like sleuthing around like, the left says he was a white supremacist. He says he was a white supremacist, but he says he's just not anymore. Turned reasonable Republican type. That's kind of his shtick now. He just straight up doesn't understand unions, and so we're gonna react to a clip of that. Just him just not understanding anything. The Amazon Labor Union also had their officer elections last week. We'll talk about that, and we're going to talk a little bit about J.D. Vance. If anybody has a recommendation for an interview, I'd like to do an interview with a J.D. Vance expert. If anybody has particularly a labor-centered J.D. Vance expert, let us know. Give us recommendations for an interview. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857. So Adam, start off. You had a message that you wanted to give to teachers as they go back to school. Do you want to do that now? Do you want to talk to teachers, or do you want to save that for next week?
I think next week will be fine.
Okay. We'll do that then. And then we will start off with Boss Watch. We had to push Boss Watch out because we wanted to go a little long on those interviews, but still some good stuff here. Not good stuff, but we want to make sure that we give it to you. Boss Watch is kind of the mirror image of our Last Week in Southern Labor segment, where we take a look at what bosses were up to in the U.S. South and the American colonies. Starting off in Texas, an El Paso contractor could have prevented a 37-year-old employee from suffering fatal injuries in February of 2024 by following federally required safety standards to avoid trench collapses, the same failure for which the U.S. Department of Labor has cited the employer 6 times for since 2015. That is... Wow. We should, if you were cited for the same failure 6 times... since 2015, and then somebody dies from that same failure that you have been cited for 6 times. We're talking about. We should be talking about criminal penalties here. This is really, we should be talking about manslaughter charges, but they're bosses, so different rules apply to them. The department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration determined a pipe layer for CMD Endeavors Incorporated was allowed to work in an excavation without a proper protective system. The trench collapsed, causing pieces of asphalt to fall and severely injure the worker, who later died in an area hospital. The city of El Paso had contracted the company for pipe work for the Cedar Grove Waterline Replacement Project, part of a citywide initiative. OSHA issued citations to CMD Endeavors for 1 willful and 1 serious violation and 2 repeat violations related to its failures to provide adequate systems to prevent trench cave-ins, stop nearby materials from falling into the trench, and ensure a trench exit within 25 feet and support adjacent pavement. The company faces over $250,000 in proposed penalties. Over in Virginia, as part of a settlement with the U.S. Department of Labor, Maersk Line Limited, one of the world's largest marine cargo service providers, will change its safety reporting policies and compensate a seaman the company terminated after they reported safety concerns to the U.S. Coast Guard without first notifying their employer. The actions follow a 3-day hearing in June of 2024 where Maersk challenged the findings of a whistleblower investigation by the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, found that the company violated the employee's rights under the Federal Seamen's Protections Act by retaliating against the seaman. OSHA found the company policy, which forbid employees from contacting the U.S. Coast Guard or other federal, state, or local regulatory agencies without first notifying the company, violated federal law. Workers have the right to report safety concerns directly to authorities without fear of retaliation. The investigation began after the seaman alerted the U.S. Coast Guard about the safety concerns aboard the Safe Marine Mafati, a 50,000-ton, 958-foot container ship in December of 2020. They included lifeboat equipment in need of repair and replacement, crew members on board in possession of and possibly consuming alcohol, improper supervision of cadet seamen, and a bilge system not preventing cargo holds from flooding. In a settlement reached after the hearing in Boston, Maersk agreed to make the following changes: remove any requirement that workers notify the company before contacting the U.S. Coast Guard, refrain from retaliation against the seaman who contacted the U.S. Coast Guard, provide all supervisors with training on the revised policy, distribute the OSHA's Seamen's Protection Act fact sheet to seamen aboard its U.S. flagged vessels for the next 2 years. Maersk also agreed to future compliance with all applicable regulations and to compensate the terminated seamen for lost wages and damages. Under the terms of the settlement, however, Maersk did not admit to violations of the Seamen's Protection Act. And in North Carolina, the U.S. Department of Labor announced that its Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs has entered into a conciliation agreement with one of the nation's leading producers of bedding components and home and work furniture, in which the federal contractor will pay $400,000 in back wages and interest to resolve alleged hiring discrimination at a High Point production facility. During a routine compliance review of Leggett and Platt Incorporated, the Office of Federal Compliance Programs determined that between November 23, 2018 and November 23, 2020, the employer's hiring practices at the facility discriminated against 308 black, white, and Hispanic applicants for production associate positions in violation of Executive Order 11246. The law prohibits federal contractors from discriminating in employment based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. That's a pretty interesting case, discriminating against black, white, and Hispanic applicants. That is pretty funny. In addition to paying back wages to affected class members, the conciliation agreement requires Leggett and Platt to provide 30 job offers to eligible class members as positions become available. The company also agreed to review and revise its hiring process and ensure its hiring policies and procedures are free from discrimination. In dishonorable mentions, we had several this week. First off, a U.S. DOL Wage and Hour Division investigation found the owner of Pace Enterprise, LLC, operating as Pace Realty Group, misclassified 37 maintenance workers and parts runners as independent contractors, and by doing so, failed to pay them overtime for hours over 40 in a work week. Additionally, the employer failed to keep legally required records. They recovered $75,000 in overtime wages and $75,000 in liquidated damages for 37 employees. The U.S. Department of Labor announced today that its Mine Safety Health and Health Administration completed impact inspections at 15 mines in 12 states, including Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, Virginia, and West Virginia in June 2024, and cited mine operators for 195 violations. The U.S. Department of Labor has asked a federal court in Houston to stop the owner and operator of 17 single-family residential group homes and a day habilitation center for adults with disabilities, Team Abilities LLC, and its founder and CEO, Rachel Jex, from violating several federal employment regulations and pay $115,000 in stolen overtime wages and another $115,000 in liquidated damages owed to 56 current and former workers. VibraLife of Katy LLC, a rehabilitation and assisted living facility in Katy, Texas, violated federal law when it denied an employee an accommodation for her sleep disorder and then fired her, the EEOC charged in a lawsuit. The EEOC also sued Missouri-based trucking company Transportation Management Group, doing business as Wilson Logistics, for violating federal law when it refused to hire a deaf job applicant because of his disability. Mia Aesthetics Services, ATL, LLC, LLC and Mia Aesthetic Services LLC, a cosmetic surgery provider with offices in 11 U.S. cities, illegally discriminated against a disabled employee when it refused to provide a reasonable accommodation and terminated her employment, the EEOC charged in a lawsuit. And finally, Walmart Stores East will pay $75,000 and furnish other relief to settle a disability discrimination lawsuit brought by the EEOC, which alleged that the company fired a North Carolina employee after they requested a reasonable accommodation, were denied the accommodation, and then fired after they made a complaint to HR. You can get Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor as a newsletter right in your inbox. Every single week on Monday and Tuesday. You can do that at tvlr.fm/contact. Just let us know that you would like to be on the email newsletter list. tvlr.fm/contact. We've got a caller on the line from a 267 area code. 267 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Jacob and Adam. Hey, it's Infinite Content.
Infinite Content. You know, we haven't heard from you in a while, and preparing for this JD Vance segment that we're going to be doing here in a little bit. I just heard you this morning in a segment that we clipped about JD Vance some time ago. So I have heard you recently, but you have not called in recently. So so it's good to hear from you again live this time.
Like I said, I was going through the grieving process. And then I was job hunting. But I'd like to tell you about some national labor news because there is a serious issue going on in the pharmacy industry. With Rite Aid closing up so many stores, they're becoming pharmacy deserts, just like food deserts in areas. I wanted to bring that to the listener's attention because Rite Aid is heavily present on the East Coast and out west, and in certain areas. So with Rite Aid going through their bankruptcy things and them closing stores, like they're shutting down a lot of stores in a lot of areas. That's becoming a public health issue.
Right.
I'm not sure if you all are aware of it.
Yeah,
Now,
I didn't realize that they were shutting down, honestly. I mean, there's a few down here in our area, but not very many, and not any that I go by regularly. So I didn't even catch that news. And you're right. I mean, that's going to leave, a lot of neighborhoods without a pharmacy close by. And that's tough for folks, especially, if you don't have transportation. So it's, especially the poorest folks and elderly folks, it's going to be really tough.
Or just regular folks who just don't have the time or they just don't have the time in their day to get to a pharmacy because a lot of pharmacies now close at 7 p.m. Local time. So if you don't get off until 6, you're working like 10 to 6 or 9 to 5, and you have to commute. You might not have the time to get to your pharmacy until like the weekend. So you have to be very judicious when you're able to go pick up your medications. And medication is ranks right below food in importance.
Yeah.
Right.
If you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, like I said, this is a national thing where, like Walgreens rather, also closed a bunch of pharmacies as well. And what I've been noticing is a very disturbing trend that they're closing them in lower income areas.
I've heard in some cases they even like tried to imply like shoplifting or crime was connected to it, which I really don't buy, frankly. But yeah,
neither do I.
Well, yeah, there were actually some reports where, I mean, on one of those shareholder calls, the Walgreens CEO, I think it was him that said something about we kind of overplayed the shoplifting thing last year. Like literally, I mean, not a quote, but basically a quote. It was that explicit.
It's a great gross miscalculation because depending on the chain, the pharmacy might bring in actually 2/3 of the revenue to a chain. It can bring in anywhere from 60 to 67% of the revenue and income to a chain. Like the store I worked at 20 years ago, the store was doing easily about $250,000 a week in revenue, and pharmacy was bringing in like $180,000. This was 20 years ago.
Right.
So it's like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. The only saving grace is that hopefully this causes the bringing up of independent pharmacies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally I had to swap to one of those myself. I was using Walgreens for some time, and it was so tough to actually deal with them, especially during medication shortages and things like that. It was just easier to deal with
it was
local
supply
pharmacy.
chain shortages. I'm not even going to. I'm not even going to lie. There were serious supply chain shortages.
Right.
One with ADHD drugs. Two with for a while with some antibiotics for children. 3 with eye antibiotics. Look, I could. I'm going to air it out because I have no problem. I'm not. I have no problem about speaking about it, and I hope you all clip this for others to listen to. When there's supply chain shortages, you do what you have to do. Like I'm calling over to the doctor and tell them, look, this is not available. You need to write for an alternative. And I have parents come and get stressed out. I have like young adults come and get stressed out. I'm like, look, this is not available. I'm going to call your doctor and let them know that this is not available. We need to you need to send in an electronic script for an alternative therapy. And you're like, well, that didn't work as well for me. I'm like, I hate to say this, but oatmeal is better than no meal. So you might need to go back to a medicine that worked some for you, but didn't work as well as this one. But that one isn't available, and we don't have a release date on when it's going to be available. So, and like I said, it stressed us out because we don't like to see our customers and our patients stressed out because they can't get their medicines, and they're stressing. Like it was a cycle of drama, and we're dealing with COVID. Like so, like I said, I've been a pharmacy tech for 20 years, so I won't say all the companies I work for because I only mention Rite Aid as an example, but I've worked for a lot of major chains in my pharmacy tech career. But and I know that I'm taking it as a tangent, but these are things that are labor related that people need to understand. It's like you have a lot of pharmacists and a lot of pharmacy techs that are burnt out. So people, if you happen to go to a pharmacy, please understand that we've got a lot on our plate and we know more about the inside baseball than you may not. That while you're stressed out and don't understand what's going on, or you can't get your medicine, we don't hold medication back.
Right.
If it's not available, it's because we can't get it, or it's new regulations that we have to toe the line on.
Right.
We're not being jerks to you. But I just figured I haven't talked to you all in a while. I'm back up and running, and my birthday's tomorrow.
Happy birthday. Yeah, appreciate you.
Yeah, and I just thought that I haven't talked to you all in a while, and I'm actually free to talk because I'm up and running, and this is my first off day at my new job. So I figure I'll call you all up and say, solidarity, brothers. Always speak up for workers, and if I ever find any new or interesting or fascinating stories about labor that's in the South or not in the South, I will more happily share them with you.
All right. Appreciate it. Good luck at the
All
new
right.
job, and happy birthday. Thanks for your call.
And solidarity, brothers.
All
Appreciate
right,
you.
yeah, same to you. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you want to get where he was. You can call 844-899-8857. 14,000 Disneyland workers just won a $6.10 an hour pay raise.
Nice.
That is huge. It is the biggest ever wage increase at Disneyland in California. The minimum wage at Disneyland in California. Did I say Florida? I meant California if I said Florida. We're talking about California. Workers at Disneyland in California. The workers in this 14,000 employee bargaining unit are going to see their pay, their wage, their minimum wage rise to $24 an hour. Immediately upon ratification, workers will get a huge pay bump to a minimum of $24 an hour, and it's going to be a minimum wage will be higher for some job classifications. It's a 3-year contract, and the raises will be $6.10 over 3 years. So the some other things in this contract are longevity increases for senior cast members. They also got attendance policy and sick leave improvements that give cast members more opportunities to attend personal issues without fearing discipline, and new premiums for cast members. The company said that, quote, all cast members with a current rate of $19.90 an hour will receive a nearly 21% immediate initial raise to $24 an hour, which will increase to at least a nearly 31% increase over the life of the contract. Unions involved, unions representing the 14,000 employee bargaining unit include the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, BCTGM, Local 83, the SEIU, United Service Workers East, SEIU, USWW, Teamsters Local 495, and the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 324. They are part of a coalition of unions that has been dubbed the Master Services Council. They did vote on the deal. The members did ratify it. And so, yeah, that's very, very exciting news for those 14,000 workers. That only came after a strike threat. You know, they've been in negotiations for months now, and I think actually they were working under an expired contract. So that shows the importance of being able to strike and then threatening to actually use that ability, and that threat being credible. Right? If you're just bluffing and your employer knows that you're bluffing, then, a strike threat is not going to actually be that meaningful. Hamilton Nolan has a piece back from January, but he shared it again after these raises were announced that I think is, it's very apropos, and it's worth reading the whole piece. I'm going to quote from portions of it, but the whole piece is very good, as is all of Hamilton Nolan's writing. The title of the piece is "Every Pay Bump is an Admission of Guilt." That's on his newsletter, How Things Work. You can go to hamiltonnolan.com to check that newsletter out. But yeah, so here's from his piece, quote, "These pay raises are, of course, attempts to," and in this piece he's talking about the pay raises specifically from the Southern automakers, the non-union automakers, in the wake of the UAW campaign to organize the non-union automotive manufacturing sector. So he says, of those pay raises, and then it's applicable here as well, "These pay raises are, of course, attempts to head off worker enthusiasm for unionizing, but let's take it as a given that everyone recognizes that. But it's important to be even clearer about the implications of these kinds of desperate gestures. These are things that your employer could have given at any time, but are only giving you now because they fear the prospect of you having a union. Is such a thing really an argument against a union? The answer is no. Obviously, no. It is an admission of guilt that companies hope you will not notice." He continues later in the piece, I know that these points are extremely basic, but the precise way that the general public interprets these things is important. When you read that the UAW's recent strike will raise base wages by 25%, ask yourself, where did that 25% come from? When the online media industry was unionizing several years back, it was common to hear about workers making rock-bottom salaries who got $10,000 raises the moment that the union contract was signed. Where did that $10,000 come from? How is it that the act of collectively demanding something with the explicit threat of withholding our labor power can, with no other changes in the business, produce such huge new piles of money for workers? The answer, of course, is that the money was already there. The value is already being created. The only question is who is getting it. Your boss was just taking it instead of giving it to you. This is the simple but critical point that we all should chew on, because when you chew on it, the flavor of revolution leaks out into your gums real sweet. Every celebration of a union's hard-fought gains in a strike or in bitter contract negotiations should be accompanied by an equal and opposite condemnation of the company itself for making its own valued team members go through such a struggle just to get what was clearly there all along. Capitalism makes every company's management into hoarders, pathological little rats that will not stop gorging themselves on every scrap even when others are starving. You do the work, the company collects the money, it gives you the lowest amount possible to keep you working, the rest goes to make people who don't do the work very rich. And, in the sickest twist of all, no matter how rich they get, they never, ever get to a point where they say, you know what? We should give the workers all this extra money now. Very apropos. There's a lot more in that piece. Don't want to spoil all of it, so go to HamiltonNolan.com, read that piece. The piece is called Every Pay Bump is an Admission of Guilt. But yeah, really excited for these workers over at Disney. $14,000, that's a huge raise. And I mean, it's good for the, it's obvious. $14,000 getting a minimum of a 20% raise immediately. That is a huge, huge amount of money going into the local economy as well. That's going to be, flowing through the community as opposed to, being hoarded, as Nolan mentioned, being hoarded
because
by these people at the top.
All these workers are going to go out and they're going to buy their kids new clothes for back to school. They're going to fix their car, right, because they haven't been able to get it fixed for the last couple months and they've been putting it aside. They're going to finally take care of some of those repairs that they needed done months ago. All of these kind of things where, like you said, they're going to spend in the local economy and actually lift folks up from the bottom up. So and I really appreciated Hamilton's point there. And I think, something that's worth mentioning is that a lot of times you see companies fight unions really, really hard. And, often we're supposed to suspect is just greed. Right, that Amazon or Starbucks or these companies, they fight unions really hard because they're greedy, and that is true. But it is also about the power,
right?
And the truth is, Jeff Bezos or Amazon, they can easily afford to give the Amazon labor union pretty much anything they could ask for at the bargaining table.
Right.
Almost no request would be too outlandish for the coffers of Amazon. Right? They could easily afford to pay for raises and benefits and any sort of settlement in a collective bargaining agreement. It's the power that they don't want to share.
Right.
They will spend more money fighting a union than they would on just giving the pay raises in the first place that the workers were asking for, right? And that is definitely a power situation, because unions at their best change the balance of power. That's why they're important. Right. That is why they're so important. That's why workers need them. We had the caller Infinite Content talking about, pharmacists and pharmacy techs being stressed out and dealing with changing working conditions. And it's all true. And you know what they need? They need a union.
Right.
Not to sound like a broken record, but they need a union because it's important. It gives you power. It changes the balance of power.
Yeah. I was talking to my wife the other day about something, and I recommended, unionization as the solution for the problem. And she was like, it's always unions with you. You're always recommending unions. And it's like, well, that's true. That's true. I am, like Adam said, kind of like a broken record. But also, unions are genuinely a solution for a ridiculous amount of the problems in society. Like, I mean, just an inordinate percentage of any problem that you can talk about would, if not be solved, would be made better by unions and worker power and the like. So if I say unions are the answer a lot, it's because it's true. It's true.
Facts don't lie.
Yeah, that's right. The UAW, the United Auto Workers, endorsed Kamala Harris last week after, they, just as with their endorsement of Joe Biden, they took their time with it. They had a more deliberative process than some of the other unions. Some unions actually came out like the day of. I think there were some unions that were the day of they endorsed Kamala Harris, which is kind of bonkers. And I do think that it actually does kind of devalue the idea of an endorsement of an organization of 1 million members when that organization can so quickly when you can dole that endorsement out in 3 or 4 hours. I think it cheapens it a little bit, but what do I know, right? I'm just a effing nobody, right? So, but nevertheless, the UAW has been more deliberative in their endorsement processes, and they were as well in their endorsement for Kamala Harris. But they still did come out. This is still relatively soon, endorsing Kamala Harris, and Sean Fain gave an interview to a Detroit news outlet about their endorsement. So I wanted to play some of that for you because there's a lot of really good points that he made in this interview. So let's play this first clip where he's talking about some of the reasons that the UAW decided that they were going to endorse Kamala Harris.
Anything we do, we look at facts. So it's not political party. It's not my opinion or a board member's opinion. It's putting facts in front of our members and in front of ourselves. And when you do that, when you take Donald Trump and look at his body of work over decades and what he's said, what he's done when it comes to working class values, working class people, and when you look at Kamala Harris and her career path and what she's done over the years, it's a very telling story. And it makes the decision very easy. Going back to the recession, Donald Trump blamed the auto workers for what was wrong with the auto companies, which was a complete fallacy. It was a out-of-control mortgage crisis and banking industry that undermined everything. And workers, again, like always, they get unfairly blamed for any time there's something wrong in this country. And so you go back to 2015 when Trump was running. He talked about doing a rotation in this country of our jobs out of the Midwest, somewhere where they pay less money, so we'd be begging for our jobs back at less pay. When he was president in 2019. Lordstown Assembly Plant, GM Powertrain Plant here in Warren, Romeo Ford Plant for, in Romeo, the engine plant there, were all slated for closure. Trump did nothing to get involved, not one thing. He didn't say anything, didn't do anything to try to find ways to help save those jobs. 2019, GM was on strike for 40 days. Donald Trump was nowhere to be found, didn't say nothing, do nothing. Now let's look at Kamala Harris. 2019, you want to know where she was when GM was on strike for 40 days? She was on the picket line standing there with them. She stood with workers on strike. You look at 2023 in our sit-down strike last year, our stand-up strike, and you look at what was going on with Lordstown workers under Trump got left behind. Their plant got closed in Ohio. Workers were scattered all over the country to GM plants. Under Biden and Harris and their administration, they went to work with us in bargaining to save the community in Belvedere, Illinois. Contrary to what Trump says, through the IRA, the Biden-Harris administration created billions of dollars to encourage companies to locate battery work in the USA and to partner with unions in doing that. So they would be good-paying jobs, standard-setting jobs. You go back now in Lordstown, Ohio, where Trump left people behind and they were dispersed all over the country. Under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, workers are now transferring back to Lordstown because they can get a job at the Altium battery plant there. They're bringing people home that Trump left behind. And on top of that, like I said, Belvedere, Illinois, same story. That plant was left for dead. The Biden administration, Kamala Harris, went to work with us to find out what they could do. They got billions of dollars put in play to help save that community. There's product going there. There's a battery plant going there. And so it's a tale of two stories here. Donald Trump represents the billionaire class and the corporate class, and Kamala Harris has a history and a track record of standing up with working class people. So it makes the decision pretty easy for us.
And, one of the things that Donald Trump keeps hitting, Shawn Fain is really living rent-free in the mind of Donald Trump. It's almost every rally that he does, he takes a shot at Shawn Fain. One of the things that, and Shawn Fain talks about it later at a different point in this interview about how, Donald Trump just doesn't know anything about the auto industry. He just doesn't know anything. Because if he did know anything, he would not be so antagonistic towards the EV industry and so anti some of these EV mandates and things like this, because that is where a lot of the new construction and new production is coming from. I mentioned in Last Week in Southern Labor this article from Labor Notes about the burgeoning EV and battery manufacturing sector, particularly in the South. And it would be worth checking out if you have not read it. The title is New Battery Belt Opens Organizing Front in the South. And a big part of this article is just listing projects and how much money and how much jobs are going to be created from largely seed investments from the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the American Rescue Plan, all Biden-Harris administration things that would not have happened under Donald Trump. And so, let's just look at a few of these. Here, construction is humming at the Toyota battery mega site in Liberty, North Carolina, where production is slated to begin in 2025. By 2030, when the 7 million square foot complex is fully operational, it will have 14 production lines, 10 dedicated to batteries for electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electrics, and 4 for hybrid electric vehicles operated by 5,100 workers. Its price tag is $13.9 billion. In Kings Mountain, North Carolina, a pair of companies backed by a $90 million grant from the Department of Defense have plans to drain a lake that was once an open-pit lithium mine and resume mining. The companies expect it will yield enough lithium for 1.2 million electric vehicles per year. This lithium will be refined at a soon-to-open $1.3 billion facility in nearby Chester County, South Carolina. Georgia, for instance, will give Hyundai up to $2.1 billion in tax breaks and other state assistance for its $7.9 billion capital investment in an EV and battery production complex outside Savannah, forecast to employ up to 8,500 workers. There's just so much stuff. Since the passage of the IRA, companies have announced $110 billion in capital investments in new EV manufacturing, and roughly half of that money and the corresponding jobs are destined for the U.S. South. They talk about the Blue Oval site. It's $5.6 billion development outside of Memphis, where 6,000 workers will produce EVs and batteries. It will also receive batteries from another battery plant that is being constructed in Kentucky. That's a $5.8 billion project that will employ 5,000 people. Outside of Columbia, South Carolina, Scout Motors, operated by Volkswagen, recently broke ground on a site it has invested $2 billion into. Once operational in 2026, it'll employ 4,000 people and produce 200,000 cars a year. There's just all this kind of stuff, and it all goes out the window, or never would have happened under a second Trump administration, and it would not happen under another Trump administration in 2024. This is all, it really from a survival point of view, this is not a surprising endorsement. Shawn Fain talks some about this dynamic with the EV industry in the interview as well. So let's play this clip from Shawn Fain.
Look, I two names really resonate high with our union. The top name, it was Andy Bashir. I'm a huge Andy Bashir fan. I believe Andy Bashir, he's been there with us every step of the way.
And then also at the RNC, Trump had called you out by name at one point, said that you should be fired. What do you say to that? Were you watching this first off, and did you see these comments? And
actually, I wasn't watching, but my phone started blowing up with people texting me, and it was I just kind of laughed. I mean, look, those are Trump's two favorite words. He wants to fire everybody. Hell, he fired 40 of his people he put on his cabinet, over the term of his presidency, which, it's who he is. He's the boss. He represents the boss. He represents the corporate class. He doesn't care for working class people. And, the irony of his comment in the context he was saying was that the UAW should be ashamed and that I should be fired, was that, think about what he said in that sentence. He said, China is building factories in Mexico. Well, what the hell does the UAW and do we have to do in America with a foreign company building a factory in Mexico? I don't know what role we play in that. I know we have no role in that. Obviously, Donald Trump doesn't understand that concept. But I can tell you what I do know about the battery EV industry. With the Inflation Reduction Act and the money that the Biden-Harris administration put forward in this and the conditions they put in there, about pushing companies to partner with unions to make these good-paying jobs. There's over 30 factories that have been built or being built in this country to deal with battery EV work. And those are being built in America because Harris and Biden administration put funding toward that, to make sure that work is located here. What did Donald Trump do when he was president to do anything like that? I can tell you what he did, nothing. We're for sale. Donald Trump admits it himself, he's for sale. He proudly admits he's taken $45 million a month from Elon Musk. Basically, all he's saying is, I'm a sellout, and here's my price, and I'll do whatever you want as long as you give me money. I'll gladly sell out to working class people, and that's what Donald Trump's doing. So he just basically told us, he's a lapdog for Elon Musk, and whoever else will do the bidding.
You kind of mentioned EV battery plants. I know Trump, even I think in that same speech, the RNC said that he would get rid of the EV mandate. I guess is the UAW preparing for the possibility that if he is elected, something like that happens? And what is kind of your thought on that situation?
Well, again, it goes back to how little Donald Trump understands the auto industry and how little he cares about the auto industry and auto workers. So let's say you eliminate the entire battery industry. The big three alone closed 65 plants in the last 20 years, many of them under Donald Trump's presidency. So what does that do if he kills the battery industry? What does it do to save jobs in America? I don't know. It doesn't do anything. Donald Trump had an opportunity to save auto jobs in America when he was president, and he did nothing. So the whole thing is a fallacy, and it's just a point. He's all talk. He's a con man, and that's what he does best. And unfortunately, some people buy his, I won't use the word, but BS. And unfortunately, we don't fall for it. We know better, and facts say different than his spin.
So there you go. Really compelling stuff from Shawn Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers Union, comports with. It just comports with reality as far as the difference for the UAW as a union and as an organization of auto workers. The difference between a potential Trump administration and a potential Kamala Harris administration. They have also weighed in, the UAW and other unions, although there's something funny about that. I'll share that in a second. But the UAW has weighed in on the Veep stakes. And I told you that, last week that the reporting was, pretty indicative that the two top choices for VP among unions were Bashir and Walz. Well, unions in Minnesota released an open letter last week that said, in part, Walz is a former high school teacher, football coach, and member of Education Minnesota, the state's union of educators. As governor, he has been an ally of working families. He gave educators raises by increasing education spending by billions of dollars, enacted paid family and medical leave for all families, provided unemployment insurance to hourly school workers, expanded the collective bargaining rights of Minnesotans, provided free school meals to every Minnesota student, appointed a labor lawyer to lead the state Department of Labor and Industry, signed a tough law against wage theft by corporations and developers, and made it illegal for employers to force working people to attend anti-union meetings. So there's some other stuff that Walz has done, I think, generally that would be looked on well by unions and progressives and left-wing people more generally. And so that's one of the reasons that and also he is not like offensive to kind of the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And so there's really a lot of, and actually some reporting just came out that I think yesterday the reporting came out that Nancy Pelosi is favoring Walz and is lobbying for him. So, Walz heads are feeling good right now, but this letter was signed by Bernie Burnham, which is a very funny name, and Brad Leto. Bernie Burnham is president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, and Brad Leto is secretary-treasurer of the Minnesota AFL-CIO. It was also signed by other unions and other AFL-CIO labor council, and I think probably not coincidentally, the AFL-CIO National Federation sent out an email to all state federation and CLC leaders. I'm on those emails because I'm president of the Labor Council here, reminding us that we're not allowed to go out of step with the National Federation on national and international issues. So I think that was, literally like the next day this email goes out. So I think Bernie Burnham was getting his hand slapped a little bit there, but not really that big a deal. I don't think anybody really cares that much. So obviously they can't say anything about the UAW or individual affiliates making their preferences known, and that's what Sean Fain did last week in this interview on CNN, where he makes the case for Beshear.
Look, I two names really resonate high with our union. The top name, it was Andy Beshear. I'm a huge Andy Beshear fan. I believe Andy Beshear, he's been there with us every step of the way. And then also Governor Walz in Minnesota. Those are really our top two people. And both of those men walked the picket line with our workers this past fall. And they've always been there for working class people. So, we'll see what the vice president does. And, like I said, she's got to pick who she's comfortable with. But that's typically where we're leaning. So,
yeah.
Supposedly, my mom hates it when my dad says supposedly with a B instead of a D. But supposedly, Kamala Harris is expected to make an announcement on her VP pick by Tuesday. So we should know here in a few days who it's going to be. But yeah, unions seem to be coalescing around either Beshear or Walz. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, those are the two favorites, it sounds like. But, personally, I don't know that it makes a whole big lot of difference policy-wise. But, it is a signal. And
Right.
So certainly it'd be better that someone friendlier to labor get that nod.
It's also probably it may be worth noting that, the VP picks are it's totally a DEI hire, right? Because it has to be a white guy. Gretchen Whitmer.
It seems like
Gretchen Whitmer is also a very popular governor in her state, not being considered. Wes Moore in Maryland not being considered. The only names that that are going around are these white guys. So
Interesting.
Yeah. Here's something else. We've reacted to some clips of Destiny talking about unions in the past, and unfortunately, it seems like he has not been watching our videos that we clip and put out there, because he continues to have the same opinion about unions, and so Destiny needs to watch the Valley Labor Report. I think it'll really help him out, but so far he has not, and he has on a bunch of different types of folks, and last week he had on Richard Hanania. And so Richard Hanania, I really don't know just that much about him, except for that he is an admitted former white supremacist. And currently a conservative, and like his shtick is kind of like, I'm a reasonable Republican kind of thing. Like, I criticize Trump, I don't like Trump, and I don't like the Democrats. And so that's kind of like his thing, but his politics are conservative, and he's not, he's not shy about that. So, at least there's that. He's not, trying to hide, a conservative policy preference behind attacking Trump, kind of like Liz Cheney. Or, I don't know. Liz Cheney was never. Anyway. So that's kind of his shtick. I'm a reasonable Republican. I don't like white supremacists. I don't like Trump. But I still have all of the same policies.
But nicer about it.
Yeah, I'm nicer about it. Yeah. And so, he was on Destiny's stream last week, and he talked a little bit about unions. And so I just figured we would react to this because he just straight up, like, he just doesn't understand what's going on with unions, like their structure, how they're set up, the legal justification for unions, or he just doesn't understand it. So I thought it would be fun to react. So let's play this clip from Richard Hanania.
The teachers' unions, I think, were a very malicious force here. There was, you'd read the New York Times and you'd read, Atlantic and so forth, and there would be reasonable people. I mean, I think the liberal consensus, like the elite liberal consensus, again, like the ones who publish for the most prestigious newspapers and magazines, they were like over school closures, like very early.
Mm-hmm.
Even over like masking kids and stuff. It was just the teachers' unions who were like an interest group. Are they just responding to Trump and conservatives, or are they just like crazy people who just don't want to ever work?
Well,
and end up having
so we can pause it there. Adam, former teachers union representative. Is that what's teachers? They just don't want to work. They hate their kids. They hate their community. I mean, that's kind of seems like at least one of, Hanania kind of put two options out there. Either they're like totally irrational and super negatively polarized against Republicans, and so they just knee jerk, like whatever Republicans are for, I'm against, or they hate kids and don't want to work and stuff like this. So this is, one of the two kind of equally weighed, possibilities here from Hanania about the reasons that teachers unions reacted to COVID the way that they did. So, what's your perspective there?
So I guess there's just no possibility that they looked at the fact that there was a pandemic and thought, man, it would be great if we protected our members. The educators, the folks who keep the schools running, the teachers and librarians and bus drivers and cafeteria workers, all the education employees. Last I checked, they could get COVID, in fact. And so, if folks want to get mad about that, what happened years ago during the pandemic, the fact that teachers unions, in some cases, certainly not in all cases, but in some cases, in some states and cities, did push for remote schooling to protect their members and their students.
And their students' families.
Their students' families, right? I mean, a lot of people made a decision that certainly I think is a rational decision to look at the fact that there was a virus killing people and try to take protective measures against that.
Yeah, it's also, I thought about, initially I was going to say...
No teacher I know who actually did remote schooling enjoyed it, preferred it. They all hated it. It was miserable for them. It was, I don't know any educator who actually, preferred that or enjoyed it. So it's, that's, I think, a lot of the bias showing there, just to assume that, either they're just crazy and highly politicized, which is also hilarious. You really think teachers unions are out here mobilizing their members simply because they're loyal Democrats or something? Come on now. That's why the teachers are doing it? Give me a freaking break.
Yeah, and so, I was about to say that this aspect of the fight has been memory hold, but really there was a very strong effort, I think, intentionally, to never allow this to actually be part of the conversation. But even when teachers unions were supportive of lockdowns and school closures, quote unquote, almost to a union. Like, I cannot actually think of a single union that their position was school closures or nothing, right? The positions were actually, we want to reopen schools and reopen schools as soon as possible, but we have a few safety measures that we would like to see put in place in the classroom. So we would like to see, in particular, masks. We would like to see smaller classroom sizes. We would like to see increased investment in air ventilation and things like this. It was all, very, reasonable things as a response to a pandemic. And also, it just so happens would be good anyway to have better air ventilation. I mean, we talked to we have talked in the past to Michael Bailey, who is a air care kind of advocate locally, about some studies recently that have come out and showed that increasing air circulation by, I can't remember, it was some very modest amount, reduces the amount of sickness in schools by a very significant amount. I can't remember the numbers.
Basically,
but,
upgrading the HVAC and air filtration systems could cut illnesses by half or more, is my recollection.
Yeah, which is just like, I don't like being sick. Like, just in general, like, aside from, not wanting to die of COVID or whatever, I just don't like being sick. It's not fun. It makes you less productive. It takes away working days, and just all sorts of reasons it's not good. And so a lot of the things that they were asking for are just good in general. Would be better for the teachers and students. And
that's the thing. Come at me with a program that the Chicago Teachers Union or anyone else pushed forward and show me how that was harmful for kids and families and communities.
Right.
And make your case. But otherwise, I agree with one of our commenters that it's just about trying to connect it to conservative right-wing culture war.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And not really in touch with the reality.
Yeah, for sure. We got about 30 seconds in there. It's a 4-minute clip. So
teachers unions, I think, were very malicious.
So, for instance, when people are grilling
who just don't want to ever work, and who end up having control.
Yeah, this is another issue that I have too for the U.S. in general, is people don't seem to understand sometimes like what things are for and what countervailing forces should be for. So, for instance, when people are grilling pharmaceutical execs over like, did you raise the cost of this drug to make more money for your company? Like, you're demonizing this guy for performing his function. Like, they're supposed to make money. That's literally it. They're not here for the moral good of society. If you want to guide that, that's for government policy. Or when it comes to unions, people have this view of unions being like an intrinsically good thing, and it's like they're not. Unions are there to represent employees, and they're there to make the employees get paid more. So, like, whether or not a union is good or bad it carries no normative value. The same that a corporation doesn't carry any normative value. But people will look at like police unions are bad because they don't like police, or teachers unions are good because they defend teachers. And even with what you're saying there, like, well, the teachers unions were kind of crazy. They were just trying to get teachers to work as little as possible. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do, right? That's all. An employee is supposed to work as little as possible for the greatest compensation, and the employer is supposed to get as much work out of you for the least amount of compensation. But people normatively load these unions so much that it becomes like if you defend or oppose like the police union or the teachers union, you're either like a good or bad person. It's like, bro, it's just a union. It's just a collection of employees that are trying to get as much as they can,
So just pause it there for a second. And, it's just bonkers to me to kind of compare the structural place in society of a CEO who is, killing or impoverishing people by, increasing the cost of medication, to a teachers union who, even if ultimately you come down on the side of they were asking for things that were actually detrimental to students, they weren't killing students, right? It's totally different kind of things, but there's a certain amount of truth there. Trying to, as a worker, you want to get the most amount from your employer for the least amount of work, and your employer wants the opposite. That's something that there's a certain amount of truth there.
There's a certain amount of truth there, and I stand with the workers, because I am one, and so is the vast majority of this country and this planet. So to the extent that that's true, yes, there is something called class struggle, and it shapes everything around us, and I know which side I'm on.
Right. But, he just does not, like, Destiny, you need to watch our videos, because he does not understand that actually, unions do more than just represent their members. I think that I think that ideologically they should do more than just help their members. But I think structurally you are actually just inclined to do more than help just your members because of the nature of what unionism is. I think structurally it makes it easier and lends these organizations to a broader remit in society. You know, I mean, because if you buy the fundamental base logic of unionism, which is that we are stronger together, we can get more together, we are more powerful together. If you're able to buy that within your workplace, that, I mean, just structurally, by the nature of the way the organization is structured, you are more likely to recognize that logic in society. And so then you are able to, unions kind of force you to, in a union workplace, think beyond your individual atomized self and your own individual atomized well-being, right? You have it forces you to broaden your circle of concern, and so the act of broadening your circle of concern, I think, makes you more willing to do that generally in the population, right? And so I think there are structural reasons why that would make sense, that would be the case. And then I think actually you do see data that shows that that is the case, right? Union members are more likely to vote for things that are good, in the community, more likely to raise wages, less likely to have racial antagonisms and be racist, more likely to be civic members of civically engaged people, more likely to volunteer for organizations and charities, more likely to donate, and then the effect of unions is good for even non-union employees, raises wages, increases competition in the, employment sector and all this kind of stuff. So like he just fundamentally does not understand the role of unions in society. And it's very concerning because he has a huge audience, and it's a shame.
Yeah. Cause I don't really know who the hell either of these creeps are, but, the truth is that unions are working class institutions. We don't really have much, if anything, else like it in our society that is actually belongs to working people. Right? These are institutions that are made up of workers. They belong to workers. They are run by workers democratically. Democracy varies from union to union, obviously. We talk about that a lot on this show. We talked about it this morning, right? With a union that needs some reform and needs more democracy. But that's unique. That is a unique thing, the fact that working class people have institutions of their own, which they can run democratically. It is not comparable to really anything else in our country that I can think of. So yeah, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of power in our society. To compare, it's just the CEO's job. Right. Okay, there's some, like you said, some truth to that. So what you're admitting, though, is that there is this conflict. There is an antagonism between folks like CEOs and folks like the rest of us who work for CEOs or who have to consume based on the prices set by the CEOs. So it's not just some neutral thing that varies depending on context and situation. Now, I do want to comment on the police. There is a really fierce debate within the labor movement about police unions. I personally do not consider police unions to be labor unions. I do not consider them to be part of the labor movement. I do not believe that police officers are working class. That's my personal opinions. Folks are welcome to disagree with that. But I believe that their relationship to the owning class, to the ruling class, the rest of us and the working class, and their relationship to the economy is different fundamentally from a teacher, from a painter, from an auto worker, because their relationship is very different. They are literally guard dogs of the system. That is their role. That is what they are paid to do. And so they may culturally be very working class in terms of their background, education, culture, but personally, I do not consider police unions to be traditional labor unions, are part of our labor movement. I do not believe we should include them. I think it's very obvious. Every labor dispute, virtually every labor dispute in the history of our country, the police have been on the opposite side of the workers.
Except for Sid Hatfield, the one good cop in West Virginia. But
right. So yeah, I did want to address.
But he was
that.
assassinated, I think, if I remember correctly.
He was, yes. But yeah, I want to address that. But so just a lot of nonsense, really.
But yeah, I mean, and that's kind of due to the structure of the thing, and you see that play out when other unions are attacked by the elite. The cops are kind of left out because there is an antagonism between the owning class and the working class in basically every other union. Except for cops. There's not really an antagonism between cops and the owning class, or at least it is much more submerged. And that's why, I mean, that's why their relationship to the rest of the labor movement is so strained at the very least. I mean, like you said, they're basically always on the side of the company. And the biggest cop union in the country is explicitly antagonistic towards the rest of the labor movement, the FOP. I mean, they're not part of the AFL-CIO for a reason, and there are structural reasons for that. But okay, we're about to get to this part where Hanania just really goes off the rails in terms of, I mean, we've been talking kind of ideologically and like structurally what unions are, but there's this really funny legal argument that Hanania puts forward. There's one of the big reasons that I wanted to react to this, because it's just like,
it's a collection of employees that are trying to get as much as they can, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be as blasé about it. I mean, I wouldn't say that, they're just doing what they're doing. I mean, they are a government. It's a government institution that is working against the rest of society. Now you have a legislature, they pass a law. They have to balance the teachers, they have to balance the kids, they have to balance the interest of parents. They're supposed to, the taxpayer, they're balancing the interests of all society, right? You have one group of people that exercises power just over this one faction, which is the government itself. It's like the government trying to extract from the rest of society. So I think in a case like that, I mean, I think you can say...
Well, careful, because the teachers union itself, I don't believe that's not like a government, like the American Federation of Teachers, that's not that's a private entity, right? I don't think it's a government union.
Now listen to this.
Well, it's not officially a government union, but it's the federal law that basically requires the union law is sort of complicated. I know in the private sector, I haven't done the research on the public sector, but in the private sector, basically, they have a law where like if the majority votes for unionization, they get to basically do what they basically get to negotiate on behalf.
He was about to say do whatever they want,
right? So it's a government thing where you can't just say screw you, union, go off, right? Like you have to deal with them because the government. I'm sure it's the same way.
Sure, there might be some favorable. Yeah, sure.
And they used to mandatory. They used to take out the dues. They stopped that. There was a Supreme Court case that stopped that. So, but at their heart, unions are they're either government institutions or they're facilitated by government. I mean, they wouldn't
really
they usually wouldn't exist otherwise.
Sure,
wouldn't
possibly,
exist otherwise.
Although on the other end, if it wasn't facilitated to some extent by government, then the argument would probably be that lack of unions are facilitated by government, because then every private corporation could necessarily just say no unioning, or we're going to literally just fire you. In which case, unions would never exist. And now people are like, okay, well, we don't have any kind of government like protection or sponsorship for a union. We're completely fucked, right?
Yeah, I mean, from a libertarian perspective, what defends the workers and gets them better wages and better conditions is the market is competition, right? So if somebody's screwing over their workers, they find a better environment. It's not a perfect system, but it does create the right incentives. Obviously, there's going to be power asymmetries. If you really are worried about that, I would prefer just giving people money directly, and then the balance is not so bad anymore. If you have a universal basic income or some kind of means-tested welfare policy, like, okay, but I think the competition is the best way to sort of determine, like, the distribution of labor and resources.
Okay, I think there are, if we go into that, I think we'll find it.
Okay, so there was a lot there. I didn't want to stop it because we're coming close to the end, but there was a lot there that we have to respond to. And so just this legal theory that he was putting forward. Let's talk about that. So he was about to say, oh, the government mandates it. And then he was about to say it, but he said it in his head, and he was like, no, that doesn't sound right. And then he was like, I haven't done the research. And then he starts to say something else, and then he's like super confused. And
basically,
basically, as he was saying it, he realized, he was like, oh fuck, like I don't know anything. And I'm just saying, like I thought I knew, but now as I'm trying to say it, I don't know what's going on. So I'm just gonna kind of ramble my way through this. But so I think, and actually, it's kind of funny that I got this message. Because I think this is where he was kind of talking about there's a government law that mandates teachers unions or something. And so somebody sent me a message on the TVLR Twitter that talked about how one part of Project 2025 is revoking the NEA's congressional charter. And I looked into that, and this guy who was a good union member, but I don't think he understood it either. He was thinking that means that would destroy the NEA. But I looked into it, and actually it's just basically an endorsement from Congress of the NEA that was passed in like 1932 or something. I mean, it's like old, and it's the only union that has a congressional charter. And so that's kind of cool for the NEA that they have a congressional charter, but it doesn't actually affect it doesn't affect anything. It's symbolic. And so and actually Project 2025, if you read what they say about it, they say Congress should rescind the National Education Association's congressional charter and remove the false impression that federal taxpayers support the political activities of this special interest group. So they even recognize like this is a symbolic thing. We should get rid of it. But I think that last bit is kind of getting lost in some of the sauce for some folks. And I think that's what Hanania was talking about, but yeah, like he doesn't know anything about it, and he just saw a little bit of it, and he was like, oh yeah, it super sounds right that Congress made it a law that teachers unions have to exist. Like that's for sure what happened, and I'm not going to look into it any further at all. So I think that's what's going on there with that. And then he starts talking about, the private sector is a little bit more complicated. You know, they have 50%, and then you have to bargain with the union, and that's true. What he's talking about there is the National Labor Relations Act, which institutionalizes a labor relations regime in the United States where, yes, you do have a federally guaranteed right to organize, to have a union, to advocate for a union, and to a union election. And so if you do have a union election and you get 50% plus one, then yes, the employer does have to bargain with the union in good faith, quote unquote. But that's a very weak criteria, and actually pretty much the employer can actually just say, screw you, I'm not really dealing with you during negotiations. And we can see that by the fact that something like 50% of new unions do not have a first contract after a year of negotiations, a year out from their election win. 50%. And it's something like 40% don't have their first contract after 2 years, right? And so if it were the case that the government was coming in here and saying, you've got to agree with the union if they get 50% plus one, we would not actually see that. We would see something much different. So a little bit, again, some kind of kernel of truth there, but fundamentally doesn't understand what he's talking about. And then finally, he talks about Janus. There he says something about, he doesn't know he's talking about Janus because, again, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know anything about unions. But what he kind of put forward there was the idea that in the public sector, particularly in the federal sector, it was a law that all federal employees had to contribute part of their paycheck to unions as union dues. And it's like, that's not what happened. Before the Supreme Court case, Janus, it was legal for a union in the federal sector to bargain for union security clauses, which did mandate, which do mandate that every employee in a bargaining unit pay union dues or agency fees as a condition of their employment. But it only allowed it. It did not mandate the agency agree to it. And it did not mandate that a union bargain for it. It's just allowed. It was not prohibited. Janus prohibited it. So there's like government going in there and telling you what you can and can't do in these negotiations. So again,
right,
really doesn't understand that. So just on the legal front, I guess, before we start talking about going back into kind of theory and ideology as far as what protects employees, competition. Does competition protect employees? Before we get to that, do you have any thoughts on the kind of super fundamental misunderstanding, lack of understanding about the legal structure of unions in the United States?
Yeah, the thing that really, I guess, disappoints me is that apparently people listen to this and they have audiences. And yeah, that's very frustrating that complete bullshit can be sold to people and who may not know, who genuinely may not know. I mean, I don't know why someone would be tuning in to this stream to learn about politics. But, you know, for whoever, you know, those souls out there who are doing that, I hate that they're being exposed to misinformation and from someone who clearly, I'm pretty sure I've forgotten more about unions than this brother ever knew. And, but that's probably for the best. I mean, because it's very obvious, you know, he's not someone that aligns with the working class. And, you know, whatever weird political transformations they've gone through, clearly they didn't educate themselves on, you know, basic power in this society and how it works and how it's distributed.
Yeah, and so that goes into the thing about, you know,
competition.
And,
yeah, I mean, you boil it down, and most of these people are just social Darwinists.
Right.
They just believe in survival of the fittest. It's a dog-eat-dog world. You go out there. If you don't like your job, go find a better one. And, oh, you can't find a better one? Well, then that's your own fault because you're just not good enough. You should have started a business. Wait, you need money to start a business? You're telling me you don't already have money? Well, that's your fault. You should have been born with money. Okay? That's what, you know, you scratch the surface, and ultimately a lot of people basically believe in social Darwinism. And believe that whatever inequality we have in wealth and power is more or less justified and just the natural state of things, and any desire to upset that would be unnatural. And, you know, you have a right to believe that, but I stand with the vast majority of people who are working people who are getting screwed and who have been getting screwed for a long time, particularly the last 5 decades in this country.
Yeah, and I mean the idea that competition is an adequate protection for workers is just so belied by American labor history, but also, I mean, global contemporary labor relations. You know, I mean, you look at so many places across the globe that do not have real strong, even, I mean, the protections for organizing in America are not strong, but even less strong than us, than we have in the United States. It's really totally the idea that competition is an adequate protection is just totally belied by, you know, reality. And Jacob Jones in the chat has a good, you know, I mean, market argument for unions, and that's that unions are a response from the market that is in favor of workers. And if businesses try to stifle unions, then they're anti-free market. And their, you know, Bill says that, you know, it's basically freedom of association.
Right,
and that's
absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if we are all rational actors in a marketplace, some of us will have the bright idea to band together,
right,
that will get a little bit more and can bargain for a little bit more in that capacity. Capitalists certainly do that. They collude all the time, right? So I also the whole thing about the government being involved and, you know, yes, there is the National Labor Relations Act, and there is this framework, and there are certain protections, but as you pointed out, very weak, particularly compared to like Europe and other countries. But, you know, it's not that unions didn't exist before FDR.
Yeah, unions actually, before the NLRA, there were more people in unions than there are today as a percentage of the workforce, right? And but again, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know anything about unions. He's just talking about it.
Some politicians, such as FDR, and some elements of the ruling class had some common sense and foresight to say, you know, it'd probably be better if we legalized some of this stuff and had a an orderly framework, rather than, every time there's a big strike, we have to call out militias and people are throwing bombs and people are dying.
Right.
Because that was, labor organizing was very bloody and violent in this country, especially so in this country for many decades. Is that what some libertarians want to go back to? Because you think that suddenly people will, I don't know. I guess the idea is that, in this free market, we'll all be better off. But we've basically tried all this shit, and it was called the Gilded Age.
Right.
If it works so great, we wouldn't have fought it in the first place. So
the last thing that I wanted to say on that was about the UBI situation. And I think that really, inadvertently, kind of gives away the game behind UBI, because if actually, you were just concerned about like workers having better working conditions or getting more money, you would at least not oppose unions, but certainly you would tend to be supportive of them. But instead of that, he would actually prefer just giving people more money so that they have a higher floor for for competition in the market. And look, it's not something that I necessarily oppose, but UBI is a fundamentally individualistic kind of welfare program, right? Or an individualistic solution to the problem of poverty and destitution,
to social
and
problems,
unsafe working conditions, right?
It's an individual solution to social problems.
Because that goes back to the power argument, right? They do not want worker organizations. They do not want organizations of workers to have power in this society. They want to placate us and atomize us and individualize us so that we are not coming together and acting collectively, and because we have power collectively. I mean, if you talk about a UBI program that is any kind of meaningful, you are probably talking about more money going around in that way, certainly, than you would be talking about with just the wage premiums for union members, right? I mean, that's obviously the case. If you have a actual really meaningful UBI for the entirety of the United States, that's significantly more money we're talking about there than the wage premiums just for the small amount of union members, right? So that the idea that there are some even wealthy people that are for UBI and against unions, that gives away the game. It's not about money, it's about power. You do not have power as a UBI recipient, you have power as a union member. And that's why they don't want you to be a union member.
Right. Yeah, I think it is revealing that some folks among the elites are willing to pander to a UBI. I'll believe it when I see it, but they're willing to pander to it at least because, I don't think they see it as particularly threatening. And then I think also one of the other extensions to it is, well, we gave everyone a UBI, so now if you have a problem, clearly that's your fault, right? We gave you the UBI. Why can't you take care of yourself? Why are you struggling? Why are you mentally ill? Why are you this or that? I think that's also part of it too.
Yeah.
It's going to be, well, everybody got their check, so, anything else, any other problems are clearly individual moral failures. And so that's, I think, a big part of it as well.
We got a couple more segments that I wanted to get through real quick before we wrap up here. This one about the Amazon Labor Union. The Reform Caucus in the Amazon Labor Union won their first ever officer election. So that's good. We were, I wasn't going to take a position on it on the elections, but generally it seems like the ALU Democratic Reform Caucus were good, and they had a good program and all of that kind of stuff. But they won, and not only did they won all 15 top leadership spots, including the 4 spots on the executive board and 11 on the union's constitutional committee. So they did not lose a single election. So that's pretty cool. The Democratic Reform Caucus slate included Connor Spence for president, Brema Cilia for vice president, Kathleen Cole for secretary treasurer, and Sultana Hussein for recording secretary. Official tallies have not been released, but people who observed the vote count told Labor Notes, and this is coming from a Labor Notes article from Luis Feliz Leon, Reform Caucus wins Amazon Labor Union officer elections. Check it out. There's going to be more in that article than I'm reading here. But official tallies haven't been released, but people who observed the vote count told Labor Notes that the Reform Caucus won about 50% of the votes for each seat, and that the ALU Ma'at slate, which was the incumbent slate, got about a quarter. Total turnout was tiny, roughly 250 voters out of 5,500 workers. That's a really not good indication of the strength of the union. In a statement from Connor Spence, who was also a co-founder of the Amazon Labor Union and their former treasurer, he's the new president, he said, "We are extremely excited to announce that every candidate on our Reform Caucus slate won decisively in our union's leadership elections. After more than 2 years of fighting to reform our union to make it more democratic, transparent, and militant, we are relieved to finally be able to turn our full attention toward bringing Amazon to the table and winning an incredible contract. The movement to organize Amazon is still growing rapidly, and for us, our Teamster allies and rank-and-file members, much of this is uncharted territory. We will be communicating in the coming days our transition plan and how we expect to execute the tremendous task ahead of us. For now, we're grateful to our members, supporters, and movement allies for standing with us and making this possible." And this does come after the ALU affiliated with the Teamsters, forming ALU IBT Local 1. And it is worth mentioning that the Democratic Reform Caucus was supportive of the affiliation with the Teamsters Union. I think it was probably the right move, but everybody involved, the incumbent slate, the Democratic Reform Caucus, anybody who was a leader at JFK 8 was supportive of the affiliation vote, so I think that should tell you something. Current and former, and this is back to the article, current and former ALU executives ran on the ALU Ma'at slate, promising truth, justice, and harmony, qualities of the Egyptian goddess Ma'at. Claudia Ashterman, Tyrone Mitchell, Rena Cummings, and Arian Kingston ran for president, vice president, recording secretary, and secretary-treasurer, respectively. The slate was backed by some of the union's founders, including Chris Smalls, Derek Palmer, Gerald Bryson, and Jordan Flowers. Chris Smalls did not run for president. He declined to run. Ashterman, the leader of the Ma'at slate, declined to comment via text message. A third slate, known as Workers First, led by Michelle Valentin Nieves, a former ALU executive board member and a key leader in the union, also ran, but it garnered only a small portion of the vote. Both slates emphasized in their campaigns winning a new contract, but the Reform Caucus also vowed to make sweeping changes. Continuing from the article, and this is really important, sweeping changes to transform the union, creating a system of stewards, allowing members to vote on and approve budgets, hiring an external firm to conduct financial audits quarterly, and expanding the executive board from the current 4 officers to 20 to 30 JFKA workers drawn from the shop floor. So that's exciting, and I think particularly creating a system of stewards is important for the power and the institutionalization of the union within the workplace. And then allowing members to vote on and approve budgets is super important. I think it's just straight up not legal to not do that. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it's crazy if they were not doing that before. So, yeah, I mean, that's good, I guess. The winners of this election are going to allow members to vote on the budget. So there you go. But, I mean, this follows a lot of controversy within the Amazon Labor Union at JFK 8. Criticisms of Chris Smalls that he focused on photo ops and not organizing, that he was flaky in his commitment to the union, that he was not strategic. Also, that he was not interested in actually building towards striking, which is kind of interesting given his, militant rhetoric. But he, in an interview to the New York Times, talked about how we do not want to talk about striking in the Amazon Labor Union because workers are afraid of striking. And so we don't want to strike, which is just kind of bonkers. I can't think of a major company that was organized and brought to heel and brought to a contract without striking. You know, I mean, when you talk about the organization of the auto workers, the organization of the steel workers, the organization of the mine workers, it all took strikes and major strikes. And so the idea that you're not going to be trying to educate members about the importance of being ready to strike and being willing to strike and the power that striking gives you as a leader is just, I mean, really, you know, I mean, not good. And he was criticized for it. Also, you know, former VP Derek Palmer, he had allegations of domestic violence. He was defended by Chris Smalls before ultimately Palmer did resign after he admitted to the allegations. Smalls did not want an election until he got a contract, which was not happening. In fact, he fought the Democratic Reform Caucus's efforts to get elections, fought it in court for a long time. You know, I mean, we're 2 years out from the election win of the union before, and they still have they had never up until last week had officer elections. And so, you know, it's not good, some not good stuff. And so hopefully this is going to be a turning point for the ALU and their, you know, and their work at Amazon, because it's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That they are able to get a contract and organize more Amazon shops, because they're not going to be able to remain an island and do anything of value. It's just not going to happen. And in another update, you know, I don't have much on this. The Washington Post is paywalled, unfortunately. But Amazon Teamsters were arrested last week at the Staten Island location by Amazon. Had the cops call on them, which shows that, you know, I mean, Amazon is not going to be taking this lightly and just allowing the union to get a good contract without, you know, some real mobilization and action from the ALU. So Connor Spence and the Amazon Labor Union's Democratic Reform Caucus do seem like they are willing to talk about striking and willing to explicitly talk about that as something that they will build up to and threaten credibly if necessary. So we'll continue to follow that because it's obviously incredibly important. And then finally, you know, I'm not going to spend as much time on this as I had initially thought. Send us a message at tvlr.fm/contact if you have any recommendations for a J.D. Vance expert. I would like to interview somebody about J.D. Vance and labor. But you know, he was selected as the VP candidate for Trump on that ticket, and so a lot of stuff has been kind of resurfacing. A lot of the really weird stuff is gender politics, hates, you know, childless people, and, you know, just really kind of a lot of bizarre stuff. But, you know, more materially on the labor front, he's got a lot of stuff that people just don't know, that we want to just kind of reiterate really quickly. We've talked about it in the past, but it's worth going over again. He was very prominently a backer of a railroad safety bill in the U.S. Senate, and so that got a lot of fair and a lot of media attention and even some praise from unions. But what did not get as much attention was that he backtracked on measures of his own bill that would have imposed penalties for corporations that ignore the law. He also amended his bill to allow the same unsafe tank cars that leaked chemicals in East Palestine, Ohio, to continue circulating through U.S. cities until as late as 2028, just as rail and chemical lobbies asked. This amendment has happened a long time ago. It happened last year. But that amendment came in the wake of nearly $2 million spent by Norfolk Southern on D.C. lobbying post-East Palestine. And it also came in the wake of the company that manufactured the toxic chemicals that were released and incinerated in the wake of East Palestine, Ohio, giving $2 million to the primary Senate GOP super PAC as bipartisan rail safety legislation stalled in Congress. So not only was it amended, it was weakened at the behest of these lobbyists as they give millions and millions of dollars to Republicans. Then they didn't even let it through even after those amendments. The original Railway Safety Act directed the transportation secretary to expand the definition of high-hazard flammable trains and issue regulations for wayside defect detectors, devices placed along tracks that catch technical problems. It also required a minimum of 2 crew members on most freight trains and increased the maximum fines that the Department of Transportation can impose for safety violations, among other provisions. And another amendment that passed stripped requirements that the Department of Transportation issue rules for hazmat trains to reduce or eliminate blocked crossings and issue rules limiting train length and weight, weakening the requirement for wayside defect detectors and more. So, a lot of this stuff, a lot of the stuff that he got a lot of praise for, he has been quietly chipping away at after it was introduced, or him personally chipping away at it and him allowing it to be chipped away at. And this is just one thing. There's a More Perfect Union has a really good video on J.D. Vance. I wanted to play a couple of clips. This is some about how J.D. Vance kind of got his start. Let's play this clip from More Perfect Union.
It's a story of comically evil billionaires, the people responsible for the opioid epidemic, and even killer robots. For my next collaboration with the classroom team at More Perfect Union, make sure to subscribe to them too, we looked into what side J.D. Vance is actually on. The working class world he came from, or the elite Silicon Valley billionaire world he moved up into.
The elites in the ruling class of this country are robbing us blind.
Vance's donors, past work, investments, and the personal beliefs he admits to out loud make it clear. Vance is using the working class narrative as a way to enrich himself and the powerful people supporting him, all at the cost of the people he says he's helping, like you.
And then they went and talked about some of the some of his relationship to Peter Thiel, who is one of those kind of comic book villain characters that he talked about there. Let's listen to the relationship between J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel.
And Thiel is still taking care of JD. He was an early supporter of Vance's Senate campaign, pouring millions of dollars into a pro-Vance super PAC before Vance even announced his campaign. In fact, Thiel has donated more to Vance than anyone has ever donated to a single Senate race. Yep, you heard that right. Thiel has spent more money trying to get this guy elected than anyone has ever spent on a single candidate. Why would Thiel, a man who made his billions in tech and was on the board of Facebook until February, want this guy in office?
It's time to stop complaining about big tech. It's time to start writing them strong letters, and it's time to start doing something about it.
And it's not just Thiel donating to Vance. Vance's top donor list looks like a guest list for a union-busting seminar at Davos. The job title among Vance's donors that donated the most total money isn't nurse or construction worker, it's CEO, which is concerning because I thought I heard someone say,
the elites in the ruling class of this country are robbing us blind.
But really, why would America's elites support someone who claims to be fighting against America's elites?
It's a good question. Brian Tyler Cohen in that video from More Perfect Union talks about some of the ways that Vance, uses this pro-working class rhetoric, and then but then partners with the very people that are the originators of the problems that he's identifying to try to find quote-unquote solutions that are friendly to business. Some other stuff that we've talked about in the past. There was a strike threat at Kroger in his state, where thousands of Kroger workers were negotiating a contract that they voted down 3 times, and it was looking like they were going to strike. I think ultimately they were able to get a contract and ratified it, but they voted it down 3 times, and so it was looking like they were going to a strike, and reporters were asking him, would you go to the picket line if Kroger workers struck? And he refused to answer it. He refused to comment on it, which, because he actually does not care. And Kroger workers are not the kind of workers he cares about. If he can be seen on a picket line with a big, bulky white guy in a hard hat, he would like to do that, but he's not going to do it for, just service workers. He doesn't think they're important enough. He doesn't think they're cool enough. He doesn't think they give him enough kind of prestige, because he doesn't think that just supporting working people is the right thing to do. He only wants to do it if it looks good for him, if it'll help him in some way. And then finally, there was this recent article from Lever News, which is David Sirota's new project. They've got a lot of good stuff going on over there. The title of the piece is J.D. Vance Fought Health Protections for Steelworkers and Their Communities. The author is Gray Morin. And he says that the EPA was pushing forward some new regulations in Coke plants. And they uncovered, Lever News did, a November 2023 letter where Vance urged the EPA to abandon those new regulations designed to limit life-shortening toxins spewed from coke plants, which are part of the steel industry supply chain. These chemicals, like benzene, mercury, lead, and arsenic, harm workers in nearby communities by heightening the risk of cancers, inflammatory lung diseases, and other health conditions. In his letter, he said, quote, "I strongly urge the EPA to abandon the proposed rule to prevent unnecessary harm to domestic coke production and U.S. steel production, which is a critical economic driver of the American economic recovery. If implemented, the proposed rule will reduce coke production in the U.S. at a time when domestic steel production is more important than ever." The EPA, however, asserted that the proposed rules would likely not adversely affect in a material way the economy, a sector of the economy, or productivity. In fact, the agency's economic analysis of the rule found the total annual cost of the updates to be small compared to the total revenue of each firm. For instance, the analysis predicted it would cost Sun Coke Energy, which operates throughout the Midwest, less than 0.5% of its total annual revenue to update and meet these requirements. And that's in 1 year, right? I mean, you do these updates once and then they're done. And we're talking about 0.5% of the annual revenue for 1 year. After Vance's intervention and subsequent other lobbying efforts, the new standards, which were finalized in May, became weaker than the long-sought protections the EPA first proposed. Vance's Senate office did not respond to Lever News to a request for comment. And so, that's... like, just again, another way that he's not fighting for workers. I do have to say, though, and Lever News included this, and so I did read this, and it would be dishonest of me not to include it, I think, because this is something that he would probably hide behind if he were ever cornered on it. It is worth noting that the United Steelworkers, which is the union representing workers throughout the steel supply chain, including at coke oven plants, has also pushed back against the rule. This coming from Donnie Blatt, director of United Steelworkers District 1, in a press release supporting Sherrod Brown's call for the EPA to revise their new rules. Sherrod Brown was also part of the fight against the EPA on this, unfortunately. Donnie Blatt said, quote, "The USW has a long history in fighting to reduce hazardous air pollution in our atmosphere. But the proposed amendments would result in significant costs and jeopardize good-paying jobs in local economies throughout the U.S. The EPA should further consider revising these amendments responsibly to allow U.S. steel companies to compete globally and still achieve their desired goals." Which is effing bonkers. Really...
real pitiful work there.
Yeah, just real crazy stuff from... I don't know.
Hey, our bosses said they might lose 0.5% of their annual revenue.
Lordy.
Please don't do that to them.
Yeah, geez. Being reduced to a lobbying arm for management. That's kind of gross. But the EPA did not respond to a request for comment about why it weakened its proposed standards. The agency's economic analysis of the proposed rule determined that fentanyl monitoring of benzene, which tracks pollutant levels surrounding the perimeter of a plant, would annually cost about $116,000 per facility, a fraction of the profits of the multi-billion-dollar U.S. steel industry, the fourth largest producer of steel in the world. Of the 6 companies that operate coke ovens in the country, the EPA notes that 4 are publicly traded companies that reported revenue in 2021 greater than $1 billion. So there you go. J.D. Vance, not exactly a working class warrior. So there you go.
Yeah, it turns out you have to look deeper than just flannel shirts and pickup trucks and country music. There may be a little bit more to class in America than all that.
Might be. Just might be. All right, well, that's it. We went a little long today, but I wanted to make sure to get those. Adam, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
Just want to remind folks to go to labornotes.org/events. Check it out. There's always great training and workshops available. Don't forget to send us the craziest stuff you've seen online about unions on Twitter, Facebook, Truth Social. That'd be fun.
Well, we don't have a True Social account, so how would I get it? How would we see it?
Well, they can take snapshots.
Oh, okay. You're not talking. You're not saying send us a message on Truth Social.
Oh, absolutely
you're
not.
Saying,
no, anything
send us
you've
a
seen.
screenshot of something on Truth Social
Yes.
to our normal social media.
Correct.
accounts. Okay,
Correct. If you witness anything out in the wild, any funny discussions of unionism, just send it to us. We would love to riff on it. I guess that's really all I had. Yeah, I wanted to do a final reminder for labor notes. Training is important. It's always important to learn. So keep on learning, folks.
Yeah.
And then, send us the stupid stuff you see online. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you're local or can drive to the area, the North Alabama Labor Council is having a union summer school. We just dropped the registration link for that yesterday. You can go to the North Alabama Area Labor Council's Facebook page and register on our Action Network registration link. For the Union Summer School. It's going to be Saturday, August 17th from 8 to 6, but 8 to 9 is going to be breakfast, 5 to 6 is going to be a happy hour, going to be a good time. Talking union all day. So, and we'll have breakfast, lunch, and a happy hour, all free, courtesy of the Alabama AFL-CIO. Appreciate their sponsoring of the Union Summer School, so we can give this to area union members free of charge. So yeah, there you go. All right, that's it for us this week. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you next week.